Chapter 1474. After Chu Fengmian asked a few more questions, he let the young man go. Now that the 9 territories had been turned upside down, this young man was just a nobody, so he didn't know much about it. The only thing he was sure of was that the 6 paths demon gate had risen and could even fight against the other 6 great sections. This wasn't good news for Chu Fengmian. After all, Chu Fengmian and the 6 paths demon gate were mortal enemies. Previously, Chu Fengmian had destroyed 8 of the demon emperor's incarnations, which was close to destroying the demon emperor's nirvana divine body. Once he knew that Chu Fengmian had returned to the 9 territories, the demon emperor wouldn't let him go. Once the demon emperor recovered his strength, Chu Fengmian's friends would be in great danger. Let's return to the northern territory first. The situation in the 9 territories was more complicated and chaotic than Chu Fengmian had imagined. The most important thing now was to return to the northern territory and find Hanueli. Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi hid their figures and shuttled back and forth in the void. Originally, they had to rely on the power of the teleportation array to travel through the 9 territories, but now, Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi's strength was enough to cross the starry sky. As for traveling through the 9 territories, it was even easier. Their speed was astonishing. In a few hours, Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi had already left the 9 territories and stepped into the northern territory. The situation in the northern territory was the same as the Yan territory. It had undergone earth-shaking changes. Even in the northern territory, which was known as the weakest, there were now divine power realm and life and death realm cultivators everywhere. One had to know that in the victorious martial country, a divine power realm saint was a big shot and could establish his own sect. As for life and death realm cultivators, they could be called emperors and sweep through a country. Now, divine power realm and life and death realm cultivators weren't rare, but there weren't many people who had stepped onto the life and death steps. Even though it had only been a few months, the 9 territories had undergone earth-shaking changes. The world energy had become dozens of times richer, and a large number of treasures had been opened. However, it wasn't so easy to step onto the life and death steps. As for Emperor Realm Masters, Chu Fengmian had yet to encounter one. Soon, Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi returned to Wuxing country. Looking at the familiar Wuxing country in the huge formation, Chu Fengmian sighed inwardly. The last time he left the victorious martial country, he was only a wind-resisting realm martial artist. He was just a nobody in the northern region. Now that Chu Fengmian had returned, he was already a quasi-emperor. His strength was enough to kill the 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. Among the countless continents in the Daluo star field, Chu Fengmian had become an absolute powerhouse. Wuxing country has also undergone earth-shaking changes. Chu Fengmian was also watching. The originally barren Wuxing country was now rich in spiritual energy and spiritual herbs were everywhere. Their overall strength had increased by many times. Many blue-clothed guards were stationed at various positions. Currently, the Cold Snow Pavilion was the leader of the victorious martial nation. These blue-clothed disciples were all disciples of the Cold Snow Pavilion. Unknowingly, Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi had already arrived in front of the Cold Snow Pavilion. The current Cold Snow Pavilion was completely different from when Chu Fengmian had left. Among the mountain ranges, countless palaces stood in great numbers. It no longer looked like it was in its initial stages. Disciples were walking through it. Above the entire mountain range, there was an incomparably huge formation that shrouded it. It was enough to prevent martial artists from rashly stepping into it. Who are you people? Just as Chu Fengmian was looking at the Cold Snow Pavilion, several blue-clothed men suddenly flew over. These people were all divine power realm martial artists. Among them, the leader had already vaguely stepped into the life and death realm. They stared at Chu Fengmian and questioned coldly. We're here to pay a visit to Pavilion Master Han of the Cold Snow Pavilion. Chu Fengmian also saw that these blue-clothed men were unfamiliar. It seemed that they should be newly promoted disciples. He didn't know them. Pay a visit to Pavilion Master Han? When the Cold Snow Pavilion disciples heard this, their eyes revealed a bit of coldness. They looked at each other and said coldly, "Take these 2 people down." Rumble. The other Cold Snow Pavilion disciples all attacked at the same time. Spiritual power filled the sky, bombarding Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi. These surges of spiritual power condensed into a pagoda, falling from the sky and suppressing them. What's going on? Chu Fengmian frowned. Why was the Cold Snow Pavilion so vigilant? Even if these Cold Snow Pavilion disciples didn't know Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi, they shouldn't have attacked without knowing what was going on. However, these Divine Power Realm martial artists wanted to suppress Chu Fengmian. It was simply a dream. Chu Fengmian only lightly condensed a bit of spiritual power. The pagoda suppressing him suddenly shattered. However, Chu Fengmian didn't hurt these martial artists. He just wanted to know what was going on in the Cold Snow Pavilion. What's going on? Chu Fengmian said coldly. He already knew that something must have happened in the Cold Snow Pavilion. Otherwise, these Cold Snow Pavilion disciples wouldn't have attacked so rashly. Not good. This person's strength is extremely strong. Quickly go and ask the elders. The Cold Snow Pavilion disciples saw Chu Fengmian's strength and their faces changed greatly. They hurriedly condensed their spiritual power. It turned into a jade talisman and directly entered the Cold Snow Pavilion. Whoosh! Suddenly, a sword light flew out from the Cold Snow Pavilion. It was a venerable realm martial artist who had stepped into the 7th step of the life and death steps, the Heaven's Mandate realm expert. In the 9 zones, he would definitely be considered a powerhouse. It's Sword-Slaying Elder. Sword-Slaying Elder, these 2 people are most likely sent by the Beimang Academy. They said that they want to visit Pavilion Master Han. Please suppress these 2 people. Seeing the sword light approaching, the group of Cold Snow Pavilion's disciples all shouted loudly. People from the Beimang Academy? Whoosh! Hearing these words, the sword light was furious. In an instant, the sword light pointed at Chu Fengmian and slashed. Oh! Sword-Slaying King, do you dare to attack me? Chu Fengmian shouted when he saw the sword light coming towards him. The sword light that was approaching Chu Fengmian suddenly trembled and shattered when it heard the voice. Then, a figure flew out from the sword light. When he saw Chu Fengmian, his eyes were filled with disbelief. Chief Commander? The figure looked at Chu Fengmian and said in disbelief. What? I haven't seen you for a few months. Sword-Slaying King, you dare to attack me? Do you want to exchange swordsmanship with me? Chapter 1475. It's really the Great Commander. Sword Slayer King came back to his senses and knelt in front of Chu Fengmian. Great Commander, you're finally back. The Sword Slayer King's eyes were filled with excitement. Great Commander? Who is he? Even Sword Slayer Elder is so respectful? Is he the founder of our Cold Snow Pavilion? Upon seeing this, the Cold Snow Pavilion disciples were all dumbfounded. They began to discuss among themselves, unable to figure out what had happened. Sword Slayer King was one of the strongest saints in Cold Snow Pavilion. Chu Fengmian had taught him swordsmanship before. He had benefited greatly from the changes in the 9 zones. His cultivation had risen rapidly, and he had reached the 7th step of the life and death steps, the Heavenly Mandate realm. He was one of the prominent elders in Cold Snow Pavilion. These disciples remembered that Sword Slayer King had never knelt in front of Pavilion Master Han Yueli. But now, he was so respectful to Chu Fengmian. What happened? When Chu Fengmian saw the Sword Slayer King's reaction, he knew that something big must have happened in the Cold Snow Pavilion. Judging from their conversation, it seemed to be related to Beimang Academy. Chu Fengmian was targeted in Beimang Academy. He was forced to leave Northern Region for Central Region and participate in the 9 Zones Genius competition. This time, Chu Fengmian originally had the intention of taking control of the North Sea Academy. After all, Beimang Academy was established by Chu Fengmian's senior brother. Chu Fengmian didn't want Beimang Academy to be destroyed in this storm. Great Commander, this isn't the place to talk. Let's go inside. King Swordslayer looked around nervously. He moved his hand and opened the restriction of the Cold Snow Pavilion, bringing Chu Fengmian inside. At the same time, he also heard the discussions of the surrounding Cold Snow Pavilion disciples. This is the founder of our Cold Snow Pavilion. He's the reason why Cold Snow Pavilion can rise. You must remember him. Sword Slayer King thought for a while and called Chu Fengmian the founder. After all, Chu Fengmian had taught him before. He was his master, so it wasn't too much to call him the founder. Patriarch. I've heard that our Cold Snow Pavilion used to be a small sect. Later, it was led by an expert that made it strong and prosperous. Could it be this patriarch? Even the pavilion master's strength is unfathomable. How terrifying is the ancestral master's strength? With the patriarch's return, why should we be afraid of the North Sea Academy? The disciples of the Cold Snow Pavilion discussed excitedly. It didn't take long for the news of Chu Fengmian's return to the Cold Snow Pavilion to spread throughout the Cold Snow Pavilion. Chu Fengmian didn't bother to pay attention to these discussions. Anyway, Chu Fengmian wouldn't sit idly by when the Cold Snow School was in trouble. There was nothing wrong with being an ancestral master. Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi followed Lord Slayer all the way to the deepest part of the Cold Snow Pavilion. Inside, there was an incomparably huge and eye-catching palace. Cloudfeather Palace? Chu Fengmian was naturally very familiar with this palace. It was the Cloudfeather Palace that he had obtained in the returning ruined sky. In the end, the inheritance of Cloudfeather Palace was inherited by Hanyu Li. After all, Chu Fengmian wanted to create his own path of Sword Dao. It wasn't suitable for him to inherit it from anyone else. Even though Chu Fengmian obtained the 9 profound immortal art, he only integrated it into his own sword technique. He didn't inherit the 9 profound immortal art. However, the Cloudfeather Palace had always been in the returning ruined sky. Now, it was in the Cold Snow Pavilion. Commander, the Pavilion Master and everyone else are cultivating in the Cloudfeather Palace. My Jade Talisman allows me to enter alone. Why don't I go in and inform the Pavilion Master? Lord Slayer brought Chu Fengmian to the entrance of the Cloudfeather Palace and stopped. The palace's restrictions were extremely complicated. After all, it was a heaven-grade spirit treasure. Now that the Cloudfeather Palace had recovered its full strength, even a true emperor wouldn't be able to force his way in. For example, Lord Slayer and the others were only able to enter freely because of Hanyu Li's token. However, they were the only ones who could use the token. They weren't allowed to bring others in. It's fine, just go in. Chu Fengmian said casually. The restrictions of the Cloudfeather Palace were indeed powerful. However, Chu Fengmian was the master of the Cloudfeather Palace. How could the restrictions stop him? The symbol of the Cloudfeather Palace suddenly appeared on Chu Fengmian's forehead. It turned into a wave of spiritual energy and shrouded Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi. Chu Fengmian stepped into the palace. None of the restrictions on the Cloudfeather Heavenly Palace stopped Chu Fengmian. So many people. Chu Fengmian saw at least dozens of martial artists and demon gods sitting in the Cloudfeather Palace. They were at least masters who had stepped onto the life and death steps. There were only a few sovereigns who had stepped into the Heaven's Mandate realm. Among them, the strongest was an old demon god. The dragon force on his body was extremely prominent. His strength had reached the peak of the immortal realm. He was only one step away from stepping into the Emperor realm and becoming a quasi-emperor. Who is it? How could someone break into the Cloudfeather Palace? The moment Chu Fengmian stepped into the Cloudfeather Palace, the martial artists and demon gods who were cultivating with their eyes closed opened their eyes and stared at Chu Fengmian nervously. They were already preparing their killer moves and were about to attack Chu Fengmian. The great commander is back. Come and meet him quickly. Sword Slayer King shouted when he saw this scene. Great Commander? Young Master? Young Master Chu? Whoosh! The martial artists and demon gods who were gathering their spiritual energy just now dispersed their spiritual energy and rushed over. They were extremely shocked when they saw Chu Fengmian's gaze. Young Master, you are back. The strongest demon god Old Man hurriedly said when he saw Chu Fengmian. Pavilion Master Han is back. I guessed that the young master would be back soon. Today, the young master has finally returned. This old man was the ancient dragon turtle Luo He whom Chu Fengmian had met before. With the bloodline that Chu Fengmian had bestowed upon him, he had already ascended to become a dragon. Now, with the improvement of his strength and the great number of fortuitous encounters, his bloodline was rising steadily. He had already begun to transform into an ancient battle dragon. His strength was also extremely terrifying. As for the others, such as the saints that Chu Fengmian had subdued in the Qin Empire Kingdom, Gu Jin of the Middle State Gu family, and the Gu family head, almost all of them were present. Furthermore, everyone's strength had undergone earth-shaking changes. Why are all of you here? Chapter 1476. Chu Fengmian could understand why the Sword Slayer King and Luo He were in the Cold Snow Pavilion. However, the Gu family had also come to the Cold Snow Pavilion. Our Sky Spring City has been occupied by the Six Paths Demon sect. We have no choice but to seek refuge with Pavilion Master Han. When Gu Jin said this, there was a hint of pain in his eyes. In the entire Gu clan, only my father and I managed to escape. The other disciples all died in the hands of the six demonic sects. The Six Paths Demon sect. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered and he was about to say something. Suddenly, a series of angry roars came from outside, and waves of spiritual power bombarded the mountain protection array of the Cold Snow School. Under the bombardment, the entire Cold Snow Pavilion was shaking violently. The palaces began to shake vigorously. The Binding Academy is here again. Luo He and the others looked gloomy. What's going on? Chu Fengmian asked coldly. The Binding Academy was attacking the Cold Snow Pavilion with such great fanfare. After all, Chu Fengmian and Han Yueli were still disciples of the Binding Academy in the 9 regions. The Binding Academy heard that the Pavilion Master had returned and wanted the Cold Snow Pavilion to join the Binding Academy. The Pavilion Master didn't allow it and they were negotiating. However, a few elders from the Binding Academy suddenly launched a sneak attack. The Pavilion Master was injured and is still recuperating now. The Sword Slayer King's eyes were filled with hatred when he said this. Although the Cold Snow Pavilion was much stronger than before, it only occupied a few countries in the North region. The Binding Academy was the most powerful force in the North region. They were not qualified to compete with the Binding Academy. Han Yueli was injured. They might not be a match for the elders of the North region. They injured Yueli? How dare they? I'd like to see how capable the Binding Academy is. Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold. He disappeared from the palace in a flash. Outside the Cold Snow Pavilion, several elders were standing on top of the Cold Snow Pavilion, looking at the restrictive spell under their feet. From time to time, they would gather their spiritual power and bombard it. Although their strength was not enough to break the protective mountain array, it was enough to shake the Cold Snow Pavilion. The disciples of the Cold Snow Pavilion all hid under the protective grand spell formation, trembling in fear. No one dared to step forward and fight the elders. Has the Cold Snow Pavilion decided to be a coward? An old man sneered as he looked down at the Cold Snow Pavilion. Except for Han Yueli, there are no other experts in the Cold Snow Pavilion. Of course, they don't dare to show their faces. A small force actually dares to make an enemy out of us. You're courting death. A few old men were talking to each other. These old men all had extremely strong power of heaven and earth. Clearly, they were all Emperor Gu. There were 5 Emperor Gu in the lead. Behind these 5 Emperor Gu stood dozens of North Mang Academy's disciples. Without exception, they were all true emperors. With such strength, if they could break the protective mountain array of the Cold Snow Pavilion, it would be a piece of cake for them to sweep through the Cold Snow Pavilion. The 9 regions are really weak. They don't even have many true emperors, let alone Emperor Gu. However, I didn't expect a 7 Tribulations Emperor Gu to be hiding in this small Cold Snow Pavilion. She's from the 9 regions. Subduing her will make her easier for us. An old man's eyes flickered with greed as he spoke. However, the 9 regions have a lot of treasures. There are many ancient treasures and even immortal mansions. It's a waste to let these ants from the 9 regions get their hands on them. That's right. If we get our hands on them, we'll be able to create many experts. However, our Chen clan has taken the initiative this time. It's enough for us to plunder a large amount of treasures. Another old man laughed complacently. But what about the protective mountain array? Keep bombarding it. I don't believe that this protective mountain array can withstand our combined attacks. Rumble. The 5 Emperor Gu joined forces to attack. A crack appeared on the Cold Snow School's protective grand formation. Although the array was set up by Han Yueli and was extremely sturdy, it was still a lifeless object. Under the continuous bombardment, he was already on the verge of collapsing. Good. Keep attacking. An old man laughed with a ferocious expression. Roar. At this moment, a dragon's roar resounded from within the Cold Snow Pavilion. It was a war dragon, an ancient war dragon formed from spiritual energy. As it soared into the sky, the combined attacks of the 5 old men were shattered on the spot. At the same time, a figure arrived outside the Cold Snow Pavilion. You're not from the North Sea Academy. Who are you? Chu Fengmian glanced at the 5 old men and the group of true emperors behind them. The merit laws of these people were completely different from the ones of the North Sea Academy. After all, the North Sea Academy was founded by Chu Fengmian's first senior brother, so he was very familiar with the merit laws of the academy. However, this group of people cultivated a different kind of cultivation method. Obviously, they all came from the same force, but they weren't from the Beimang Academy. Oh? There's such an expert in the Cold Snow Pavilion? When an old man saw that their joint attack was neutralized, his eyes revealed a bit of surprise. He looked at Chu Fengmian, sized him up, and sneered. I was wondering who you were. You're just a puny quasi-emperor. A quasi-emperor is a big deal in the 9 domains, but unfortunately, you're just an ant in our eyes. Who are we? You won't know even if I tell you. But since you're already a dead man, there's no harm in telling you. We're not from the North Sea Academy, we're from the Chen clan of the 8 Saints continent. An old man burst out laughing. However, the North Sea Academy has already submitted to our Chen clan. Cold Snow Pavilion, surrender obediently today, and we can spare a few disciples for you. Otherwise, when the formation is broken, all the disciples of Cold Snow Pavilion will die today. The Chen clan of the 8 Saints continent? People from the Yama Starfield? Chu Fengmian suddenly searched for the name of the 8 Saints continent in his mind. The 8 Saints continent didn't belong to the Daluo Starfield, but it was a 4th-class continent in the Yama Starfield, which was close to the Daluo Starfield. Chapter 1477. Now, it wasn't just the experts from Daluo Starfield. Experts from other starfields also came to the 9 realms for the treasure. The arrival of an expert from Daluo Starfield was already troublesome enough. Now, even a power like Yama Starfield came to interfere. Oh? Little guy, you know quite a lot. You know about our Yama Starfield? The old man was surprised to hear Chu Fengmian's words. He thought that Chu Fengmian was just a native disciple of the 9 realms who hadn't even been to the outer space. He didn't expect Chu Fengmian to know their identity. Looks like you know quite a lot. Little guy, since you know about our power, kneel down and work for us. It's much better than staying in a small power like yours. An old man looked at Chu Fengmian with greed in his eyes. Primogenitor Sky Dragon Essence Blood. The 9 regions even have such a treasure. Kid, hand over all your fortuitous encounters and become our Chen clan's slave. Today is your only chance to live. With just you guys? Chu Fengmian didn't get angry. Instead, a disdainful smile appeared on his face. Not worthy. Boy. What did you say? Arrogant. You're courting death. No need to talk nonsense with this brat. Jianwang, kill him. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the elders of the Chen family flew into a rage and ordered. Behind them, a 6th tribulation true emperor stepped forward and looked at Chu Fengmian. Murderous intent surged in his eyes. He immediately grabbed Chu Fengmian with one hand, intending to crush Chu Fengmian to death. "Ancestor, watch out!" The disciples hurriedly shouted after seeing Jianwang's sudden attack. However, Jianwang was too fast. Before they could finish their words, Jianwang's hand had already enveloped Chu Fengmian's body. "What arrogant words! I thought you were some big shot. You're just an ant, yet you dare to go against the Qin clan? Die!" Jianwang sneered after seeing that Chu Fengmian didn't move. However, the moment his hand was about to crush Chu Fengmian, a wave of spirit energy suddenly burst out from Chu Fengmian's body. Rumble! The palm that was about to pinch Chu Fengmian was immediately shattered by this wave of spiritual power. What? Jianwang's face paled. His palm was sent flying, and he was forced to retreat. However, right at this moment, a black figure charged towards Jianwang from all directions. A dragon claw appeared out of nowhere and descended from the sky. Even Emperor Gu of the Qin family hadn't noticed the appearance of this dragon claw. They hadn't even had time to react before Jianwang's body was crushed by this claw. What happened? Who are you? When the elders of the Qin family saw that Jianwang had been killed in a single move, their expressions changed drastically. They stared at Chu Fengmian with killing intent surging in their eyes. However, under that killing intent, there was also a hint of fear. They had thought that Chu Fengmian was just a quasi-emperor. The strength of a quasi-emperor was indeed considered strong in the 9 domains, but in front of Emperor Gu, he was just an ant. Moreover, they had 5 Emperor Gu on their side. When they were dealing with Chu Fengmian, these Emperor Gu didn't plan on joining the fight. Jianwang, a 6th tribulation true emperor, was more than enough. But now, Jianwang was killed by Chu Fengmian in a single move? "I'm here to kill you all." Suddenly, Chu Fengmian didn't stop after killing Jianwang. Instead, his body flickered as he rushed towards the 5 Emperor Gu. These people from the Qin family actually dared to attack the cold snow pavilion and even injured Han Yueli. All of this gave Chu Fengmian a reason to kill this group of people from the Qin family here. The moment he attacked, a dense spirit energy enveloped Chu Fengmian's body. The power of his war dragon bloodline was fully activated. In the air, Chu Fengmian's body turned into an incomparably huge primordial war dragon. There were a total of 40,000 spirit formations engraved on the dragon scales. At a glance, it was a miniature version of progenitor Jianwang. The nomological laws of the entire sky were under Chu Fengmian's control. Under Chu Fengmian's control, it turned into a cage that no one could escape from. This person's strength is strange. Don't worry, no matter how strong his bloodline is, he's only a quasi-emperor. It's easy for us to kill him. Let's attack together, let's see how he'll deal with us. These few ancient emperors of the Qin clan seemed to be very experienced in battle. They reacted instantly. When they saw Chu Fengmian's primordial war dragon form charging towards them, a sneer appeared on their faces. Channeling their spirit energy, the 5 of them joined forces and turned into a ray of divine light aimed at Chu Fengmian. Destroy! Chu Fengmian didn't dodge when he saw the 5 people's joint attack coming at him. Instead, he waved his dragon claw, and the divine light was immediately shattered by the dragon claw. Chu Fengmian had killed countless 8 Calamity Emperor Gu. 5-7 Calamity Emperor Gu were considered an extremely powerful force in the 9 domains. Even in the Daluotian star field, the 5-7 Calamity Emperor Gu could be considered unstoppable. Unfortunately, they had encountered Chu Fengmian today. Furthermore, they had provoked Chu Fengmian. Under Chu Fengmian's murderous intent, their only outcome was death. Boom! As the dragon claw swept across, the bodies of the 5 Qin clan ancient emperors were smashed into smithereens. They screamed in agony. Their bodies screamed and turned into clouds of blood mist. The sky-devouring secret technique was activated and turned into a huge vortex above Chu Fengmian's head. It devoured all the essence and blood. At the same time, the countless remaining Qin family disciples were horrified. These 5 Emperor Gu were all elders of the Qin family. They were all important figures, but now they had all died in the hands of Chu Fengmian. The moment the Qin family disciples saw these elders die in the hands of Chu Fengmian, they wanted to flee in all directions. However, under Chu Fengmian's control, no one could take out the Heaven Ascension Sword. Under the activation of the sky-devouring secret technique, the Chen family disciples were devoured and torn apart by the power of the vortex. These Chen family disciples were all true emperors and were useless against the divine tree. Chu Fengmian pointed his finger at their essence and turned them into elixirs in the sky-devouring secret technique. These elixirs were formed from the purest energy of their essence and contained a huge amount of spiritual energy. In total, they turned into dozens of blood elixirs. Chapter 1478. Chu Fengmian glanced at the stunned Swordslayer King and the others. With a tap of his palm, the blood pills flew towards them. Chu Fengmian couldn't stay in the Han Snow Pavilion forever. Only by strengthening the Han Snow Pavilion could they protect themselves. Yanluo Star Region. Chen Family. Beimang Academy. Chu Fengmian looked in the direction of the Beimang Academy with a fierce look in his eyes. The Beimang Academy was founded by Chu Fengmian's eldest senior brother, Jianwang. Chu Fengmian wouldn't let it fall into the hands of others. Chu Fengmian looked at the Han Snow Pavilion. The mountain protection array of the Han Snow Pavilion was about to break under the joint attack of the Chen family's Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and shrouded it with spiritual energy. With a sudden grab, a brand new mountain protection array was formed. At the same time, Chu Fengmian tapped his finger and a few drops of blood essence flew out and fell into the center of the mountain protection array. They began to absorb the power of the mountain protection array and began to expand, turning into a huge blood dragon. This blood dragon was born in the mountain protection array. As long as the mountain protection array was not destroyed, this blood dragon would never die. It was impossible for the Seven Calamities Emperor Gu to deal with this blood dragon. He would be exhausted to death. Even if the Eight Calamities Emperor Gu came to attack, it would be enough to delay him for a while. During this time, as long as Chu Fengmian was in the 9 regions, he would be able to return in time. However, Chu Fengmian glanced at the 9 regions with dissatisfaction. The 9 regions were no longer the same as before. Experts from Daluo Star Region, Yanluo Star Region and many other star regions had come to the 9 regions. The mountain protection array could only withstand the attack of the 8 Calamities Emperor Gu. It wasn't enough to satisfy Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed as he looked at the Han Snow Pavilion. Suddenly, he saw sword lights flying out from the Cloud Feather Palace. Each sword light was a spiritual sword. There were a total of 100,000 of them. It was the Black Mysterious Sword Array. Chu Fengmian had left the Dark Mysterious Sword formation in the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. As Chu Fengmian grew stronger, the Dark Mysterious Sword formation was no longer enough to help Chu Fengmian fight his enemies. However, this Black Mysterious Sword formation was enough for Chu Fengmian to set up a Deadly Sword formation. However, the grade of the Black Mysterious Sword formation was still a little too low. Fire! Rumble! A colorless flame suddenly surged from Chu Fengmian's palm. This was the Puryang Skyfire. Chu Fengmian grabbed the Black Profound Sword Array and threw it into the Puryang Heavenly Fire. The spirit swords turned into balls of liquid in the Puryang Heavenly Fire. At the same time, Chu Fengmian opened his empty ring. A large number of spiritual weapons flew out from his empty ring. Most of these spiritual weapons were heaven-grade spiritual weapons. There were hundreds of them. Chu Fengmian had already killed countless true emperors and ancient emperors. He had obtained a large number of heaven-grade spirit treasures, but none of them were of any use to him. Now, he could use them to form the Obsidian Sword formation. One by one, the heaven-grade spiritual weapons were thrown into the Pure Sun Heavenly Fire. They immediately melted and merged with the Black Mysterious Sword formation. Chu Fengmian threw in hundreds of heaven-grade spiritual weapons in one go. Sword Slayer King and the others opened their mouths but didn't know what to say. Although heaven-grade spiritual weapons weren't as precious as before in the 9 realms, they weren't as common as cabbages either. Chu Fengmian taking out hundreds of heaven-grade spiritual weapons in one go was comparable to the wealth of a great power. Young lord, what kind of heaven-defying fortune did you get? Luo He looked at Chu Fengmian with mixed emotions. When he first met Chu Fengmian was still a kid. But now, he couldn't see through Chu Fengmian's strength. Even Emperor Gu could be easily killed by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's strength was beyond his imagination, and he also had a large amount of wealth. He must have robbed many sects to have such wealth. Our Cold Snow Pavilion is going to be rich. Countless disciples of the Cold Snow Pavilion were overjoyed when they saw the dazzling heaven-grade spiritual weapons. The sight of hundreds of heaven-grade spirit artifacts appearing at the same time was something that they could not even dream of. In the sky, hundreds of heaven-grade spirit artifacts gathered together with the black profound sword formation. Under Chu Fengmian's control, they began to solidify. Gradually, they turned into sword shadows in the sky. There were a total of 1,000 spiritual swords. Compared to the 100,000 spiritual swords in the black mysterious sword formation, the number was much smaller. However, the power that emanated from each of these spiritual swords was enough to shock anyone. Heaven-grade spiritual weapons. Every single one of these 1,000 spiritual swords was a heaven-grade spiritual weapon. Chu Fengmian wanted to use 1,000 heaven-grade spiritual swords to form a peerless killing formation. 1,000 identical spiritual swords were condensed and placed in every corner of the Cold Snow Pavilion. Each spiritual sword was an eye of the formation. Once it was activated, it could turn into a killing sword formation. Coupled with the Blood Dragon and the Protective Mountain Array, even the 8 Tribulations Emperor Gu would die if he was not careful. Not bad. Chu Fengmian operated the sword formation and felt the sharp sword radiance. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. With the protection of the sword formation, Chu Fengmian did not have to worry about leaving the Cold Snow Pavilion. At least, the 8 Tribulations Emperor Gu would not be able to break the sword formation. Only the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu could break it. However, the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu was extremely rare in the Daluotian star field. Chu Fengmian had only seen a few 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu. Such an expert would not come to deal with the Cold Snow Pavilion. Don't worry and cultivate in seclusion. With the protection of the sword formation, there is nothing to worry about. Chu Fengmian looked at the Sword Slayer King, Luo He and the others and said, "Yes." Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, their faces relaxed. Since they were targeted by the North Sea Academy, they had been on tenterhooks every day. Now that they had the protection of the sword formation, they could relax. Rays of light flew into the Cold Snow Pavilion and began to cultivate in seclusion to refine the blood elixir that they had just obtained. In a flash, Chu Fengmian came to the deepest part of the Cold Snow Pavilion, the Cloud Feather Palace. Hanueli was sitting in the secret chamber in the deepest part of the Cloud Feather Palace. A layer of ice condensed on her body and locked her in the ice. One could feel a bone-piercing chill when approaching her. Beside her, Luo Shi and Elder Yun were talking about something. When they saw Chu Fengmian, they stopped talking and walked towards him. The matter outside has been settled. How is Yueli? Chapter 1479. After Hanueli was injured, Elder Yun had been taking care of Hanueli. After all, Hanueli had received the inheritance of the Cloud Feather Palace. No one knew more about the inheritance of the Cloud Feather Palace than Elder Yun. "Young master, Miss Han is not injured. She was injected with spiritual energy when she was fighting against an enemy. Her attempt to forcefully trigger the spiritual energy failed. Now, there is a violent spiritual energy in her body. As long as this spiritual energy is resolved, Miss Han will be fine." Elder Yun respectfully replied to Chu Fengmian's words. "Failed to break through? Violent spiritual energy?" Chu Fengmian sized up Hanueli and found that Hanueli was not injured. Instead, the spiritual energy in her body was extremely chaotic. A spiritual energy was rampaging in Hanueli's body and had already destroyed many of her internal organs. Although Hanueli could recover from the destruction of her internal organs in an instant, if this spiritual energy was not resolved, she would be constantly attacked by the spiritual energy. Therefore, Hanueli sealed her body with ice to seal the violent spiritual energy in her body. Chu Fengmian carefully observed the violent spiritual energy in Hanyu Li's body. Suddenly, his eyes were filled with shock. This spiritual energy in Hanyu Li's body was continuously devouring the spiritual energy in Hanyu Li's body. This gave Chu Fengmian an incomparably familiar feeling. Devouring heaven power. This is the devouring heaven power. What's going on? Hanyu Li's body has the devouring heaven power? Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with shock. The violent spiritual energy in Hanyu Li's body was none other than the devouring heaven power. It was a power that Chu Fengmian was incomparably familiar with. Chu Fengmian had obtained the heart of the devouring heaven beast and had also integrated the bloodline power of the devouring heaven beast. Therefore, he was incomparably sensitive to the devouring heaven power. If it was someone else, they might be able to tell that this was an extremely violent spiritual energy that was difficult to deal with. However, Chu Fengmian recognized it at a glance. It was the devouring heaven power. How ruthless! Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with killing intent. The heaven-devouring power was in Hanyu Li's body. Unless one truly understood the heaven-devouring power, there was no way to neutralize it. As long as the devouring heaven force was not dissolved, it would remain in Hanyu Li's body, constantly devouring and eroding the power of Hanyu Li. One day, Hanyu Li might not be able to suppress it and all of his spiritual energy would be devoured. Who would have thought that someone would obtain the bloodline of the heaven-devouring beast? The corners of Chu Fengmian's mouth turned cold. To be able to use the heaven-devouring secret technique, the person who did this must have also obtained the bloodline of the heaven-devouring beast. It seemed that Chu Fengmian was not the only one who had obtained the inheritance of the heaven-devouring beast. After all, Chu Fengmian had only obtained the heaven-devouring beast's heart. Innate divine beasts were immortal even after death. Every part of their body contained terrifying power. Someone must have obtained a part of the heaven-swallowing beast. The bloodline of the heaven-devouring beast. If I obtain it, my heaven-devouring secret technique will be further enhanced. At that time, even the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu can be devoured directly. Chu Fengmian muttered to himself. According to the legends, the heaven-devouring beast was an existence that could devour the heavens. Continents could be devoured by the heaven-devouring beast in one gulp. What Chu Fengmian had now was only a very thin bloodline. If Chu Fengmian could obtain a part of the heaven-devouring beast's bloodline, his bloodline would be upgraded and his heaven-devouring secret technique would become many times more powerful. The heaven-devouring power was indeed very troublesome for other warriors. However, for Chu Fengmian, who also possessed the heaven-devouring beast's bloodline, the heaven-devouring power was simply a nourishment for him. Boom! Quietly, Chu Fengmian circulated his spiritual energy in his palm. The layer of ice on Hanyu Li's body was directly shattered by Chu Fengmian. At the same time, the heaven-devouring power that had been sealed in Hanyu Li's body suddenly burst out and began to devour the spiritual energy in Hanyu Li's body. Chu Fengmian's mind moved and circulated the heaven-devouring beast's heart in his body. Suddenly, a surge of heaven-devouring power enveloped Hanyu Li. This surge of heaven-devouring power entered Hanyu Li's body and immediately turned into a whirlpool. The heaven-devouring power in Hanyu Li's body was completely devoured by this whirlpool. In just a few minutes, the heaven-devouring power in Hanyu Li's body was completely devoured by this whirlpool. However, Hanyu Li did not wake up. She was still resting with her eyes closed. However, a surge of spiritual energy began to surge in her body. Breaking through to the next realm. Currently, Hanyu Li was at the crucial moment of breaking through to the next realm. She was disturbed by the people of Beimang Academy and was injected with heaven-devouring power. This heaven-devouring power was like a cage that suppressed Hanyu Li's realm. Now that the heaven-devouring power had been devoured and dissolved by Chu Fengmian, this cage that had been suppressing Hanyu Li's realm had completely disappeared. Her realm began to rise. With your current spiritual energy, it's too difficult to break through to the 8th tribulation Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian observed the spiritual energy in Hanyu Li's body and frowned. Although the heaven-devouring power was quickly suppressed by Hanyu Li, there was still a lot of spiritual energy that was devoured by the heaven-devouring power. Originally, Hanyu Li's breakthrough to the 8th Tribulation Emperor Gu was in the bag. However, now Chu Fengmian could see that Hanyu Li's chances of breaking through to the next realm were less than 20%. Once the breakthrough failed, Emperor Gu's losses would be immeasurable. Emperor Gu's Tao was to press forward with indomitable will. Once the breakthrough failed, it would leave behind an inner demon. Unless one's Tao heart was invincible, the next breakthrough would inevitably be affected by the inner demon. It was much more difficult than the first breakthrough to the next realm. Therefore, for most Emperor Gu, once the breakthrough failed, it was very likely that they would not be able to progress further in the future. Of course, Chu Fengmian would not let this happen. When Chu Fengmian opened his empty ring, several jade bottles flew out. The moment these jade bottles flew out, they were immediately opened. Dozens of divine elixir pills fell into Chu Fengmian's palm almost at the same time. Among these divine elixir pills, the one with the strongest medicinal effect was the original Emperor pill. It was the best elixir for Emperor Gu to break through to the next realm. The remaining divine elixir pills were sufficient to assist the original Emperor pill in breaking through to the next realm. Chapter 1480. A steady stream of medicinal efficacies poured into Hanyu Li's body. Now, Hanyu Li was on the verge of a breakthrough. After feeling the steady stream of medicinal efficacies, she immediately began to devour them and transform them into her spirit energy. Boom! Hanyu Li's strength had already reached the level of 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. She had not been able to break through because she lacked spirit energy. Now that the medicinal efficacies of the original Emperor pill were being continuously devoured, Hanyu Li's spirit energy began to rise steadily. She broke through the bottleneck of 7 Tribulation Emperor Gu and officially stepped into 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Boom! At this moment, a thundercloud shrouded the Han Snow Pavilion. The moment Hanyu Li officially stepped into 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu's realm, the Tribulation Thunder finally descended. Every time an Emperor Realm Master stepped into a new realm, they would have to go through Tribulation Thunder. Only after passing through the Tribulation Thunder could they be considered to have truly stepped into a new realm. Tribulation Thunder. It's Tribulation Thunder. What a terrifying power. What level of Tribulation Thunder is this? Who in our Han Snow Pavilion is about to break through? The power of Tribulation Thunder. How can it be so terrifying? The disciples in the Han Snow Pavilion raised their heads and looked at the sky. Now, almost all the spirit energy in the entire Northern Territory was rushing towards the Han Snow Pavilion. Waves of spirit energy condensed above the Han Snow Pavilion, forming tribulation clouds. The number of tribulation clouds was almost unimaginable. Each tribulation cloud contained an extremely terrifying power. The power of any one of these tribulation clouds was enough to raise the Han Snow Pavilion to the ground. At a glance, one could see countless purple thunderbolts surging in these tribulation clouds. These thunderbolts were in the shape of dragons, shuttling back and forth in the tribulation clouds. The sound of thunder was endless. In Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace, Chu Fengmian also felt the tribulation clouds condensing. Although they were both 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu's tribulation clouds, Hanyu Li's tribulation clouds were much more powerful than Luo Shi's tribulation clouds. After all, Luo Shi barely broke through to 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu's realm with the help of the original Emperor pill's medicinal efficacies. On the other hand, Hanyu Li had the strength to break through to 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. With the assistance of the original Emperor pill and countless saint pills, Hanyu Li's breakthrough this time and stepped into the peak of 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu's realm. But then, the Tribulation Thunder was even more terrifying. Elder Yun, ask everyone to leave the Han Snow Pavilion. Chu said Elder Yun of the Emperor of Cloud Feather of the Tribulation Thunder of the Emperor of the Tribulation Emperor of the Emperor of Nines. Of the tribulation clouds of the God of the Emperor of the Tao of the Emperor to leave. Of the Tribulation Thunder. The Tribulation Thunder of 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu was difficult for even 7 Tribulation Emperor Gu to withstand. Among the experts of Emperor Gu's realm, there were countless experts who had died in the tribulation thunder. No need. At this moment, Han Yueli woke up. She looked in the direction of Chu Fengmian and then stepped out of Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace in a flash. Inside the Han Snow Pavilion, countless disciples were looking at the tribulation clouds condensing in the sky. Suddenly, a figure shot up into the sky. It's the Pavilion Master. The Pavilion Master is awake. The Pavilion Master is going through the tribulation. Countless disciples of the Han Snow Pavilion recognized Han Yueli at a glance and were extremely excited. The rise of the Han Snow Pavilion was inseparable from Han Yueli. In the Han Snow Pavilion, Han Yueli was like a stabilizing force. When she was injured, everyone in the Han Snow Pavilion was in danger. Now that Han Yueli woke up, countless disciples of the Han Snow Pavilion heaved a sigh of relief. Should we make a move? Luo Shi asked from the side. Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi also left Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace, but they did not go near Han Yueli. Instead, they stayed in the Han Snow Pavilion and looked up at the sky. No need. Since Yueli is confident, let her go through it alone. Chu Fengmian looked at the sky quietly. He could see that Han Yueli's strength had reached an incredible level. Han Yueli had an innate godly body. Even in the entire Daluo star field, having an innate godly body was a great opportunity. Later on, Han Yueli had obtained the complete inheritance of Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace was once a force that could dominate the 9 regions. In that era, the 9 regions had not completely declined. Although it was not a sacred region, it was not inferior to the current 4 major forces of the Daluo star field. Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace was enough to dominate that era, which was enough to prove the strength of its inheritance. Although these fortuitous encounters were not as good as Chu Fengmian's, it was enough to show disdain for the geniuses of the world. This small heavenly tribulation was not a problem for Han Yueli. What is the Pavilion Master doing? In the sky, the tribulation cloud was still condensing, but Han Yueli's body suddenly moved. Han Yueli took a step forward and rushed towards the tribulation cloud. She didn't even wait for the tribulation lightning to condense. Instead, she charged into the sky. A blue spiritual sword condensed in her hand and she held it in her hand. He slashed his sword at the tribulation clouds in the sky. This is the Pavilion Master intending to destroy the tribulation cloud? Seeing this scene, the Sword Slayer Lord and the others exclaimed with their mouths agape. They had just refined the blood pills that Chu Fengmian had given them and had obtained great benefits. The Sword Slayer Lord's spiritual energy was several times stronger than before. He had officially entered the 8th level of the life and death steps, the unblemished realm. In addition to him, Gu Jin and the others had also obtained great benefits. Almost all of them had advanced by 1 level. Of course, the most shocking one was Luo He. After devouring the blood pill, Luo Shi did not step into the quasi-emperor realm, but she had reached the peak of the immortal realm. However, there were already several rays of golden light flowing within his body. The laws of heaven and earth. Luo He had condensed 20 laws of heaven and earth in her body when she was at the quasi-emperor realm. Such aptitude was enough to be considered a genius in Daluo star field and was enough to enter the 4 major powers. Her strength was close to that of a 3 tribulation true emperor. They were originally in their respective palaces, consolidating their cultivation. But now that they felt the power of the heavenly tribulation, they woke up one by one and flew out, just in time to see this scene. Destroying the tribulation cloud is much harder than passing the tribulation. Why is the Pavilion Master so confident? Luo He looked at the scene in the sky and was extremely shocked. Although they had not experienced Emperor Gu's lightning tribulation before, just by feeling the power in the sky, they could clearly understand how terrifying it was. Chapter 1481. Tribulation Transcendence was extremely difficult and full of danger. Destroying the tribulation cloud was even more difficult than transcendence. It could be said to be extremely difficult. However, according to ancient legends, the benefits of destroying the tribulation cloud were much more than transcendence. Many experts in the legends destroyed the tribulation cloud instead of transcendence. However, transcendence was already an extremely difficult task, let alone destroying the tribulation cloud. Such an action was almost like a lunatic's action. Boom! The moment Hanueli approached the tribulation cloud seemed to have sensed Hanueli's intention and was enraged. The heavenly tribulation was high and mighty and judged everything in the world. Destroying the tribulation cloud was tantamount to challenging the heavenly tribulation. Rolling thunder rumbled in the tribulation cloud. Dragons roared, revealing the tribulation cloud's anger. When Hanueli's sword approached the tribulation cloud, the power of the tribulation cloud was condensed to the extreme. Boom! Loud noises were incessant. Bolts of lightning fell from the sky like heavenly dragons. Heaven and earth shook, and the entire northern region could hear the rumbling of the thunder clearly. The tribulation lightning had truly descended. The power of each thunderbolt was not inferior to the full blow of an 8th tribulation Emperor Gu. There were hundreds of thunderbolts that fell from the sky at the same time. Ordinary tribulation lightning would only have hundreds of thunderbolts after transcending all of them. However, Hanueli's tribulation lightning had hundreds of thunderbolts in the first wave. Obviously, Hanueli's intention to destroy the tribulation cloud had angered the tribulation lightning, causing its power to increase by several times. Even in the face of the tribulation lightning that was several times more powerful, Hanueli's face did not show any signs of nervousness. There was only boundless confidence in her cold face. She slashed out with the blue spiritual sword in her hand. Immediately, the hundreds of thunderbolts were reduced to ashes by the sword. The power of the sword shattered the tribulation lightning that filled the sky. Each thunderbolt was comparable to an 8th tribulation Emperor Gu's full blow. However, in front of Hanueli, they could not withstand a single blow. The inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace is indeed extraordinary. Chu Fengmian slowly opened his mouth when he saw this scene. Hanueli's current strength was most likely related to the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace. The Pavilion Master's aptitude is unparalleled among the past heavenly emperors of Cloud Feather Palace. It's a pity that the young master didn't inherit the legacy of Cloud Feather Palace. Elder Yun was also observing Hanueli's tribulation. When he heard Chu Fengmian's words, he said regretfully, "In terms of aptitude, Hanueli might be heaven-defying, but how could he compare to Chu Fengmian?" Although Chu Fengmian was only a quasi-emperor, his strength was not inferior to Hanueli's. Hearing this, Chu Fengmian just smiled and didn't answer. The legacy of Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace was good, but Chu Fengmian wanted to walk his own path. He wanted to carve out a path for himself. An invincible sword Dao. Throughout history, no one had ever been able to match the way of the sword. No matter how powerful the inheritance was, Chu Fengmian would not accept it. "I'm afraid Hanueli's tribulation this time won't be so peaceful." Chu Fengmian looked around and his spiritual awareness swept across the northern region. Just in the vicinity of the cold snow pavilion, Chu Fengmian immediately detected the presence of many auras. Most of these people were Emperor Gu's experts. The commotion caused by Hanueli's tribulation this time could be felt by the entire 9 domains. Tribulation was the weakest moment for a martial artist. This was especially true when one had just undergone a tribulation and lacked energy. It was the easiest time to be attacked. Killing an Emperor Gu would bring great benefits. Those who could enter the realm of Emperor Gu were all geniuses who had encountered countless fortuitous encounters. Therefore, Emperor Gu would choose to undergo his tribulation on some desolate continent or planet in the extraterritorial starry sky. There were as many experts as there were clouds in the 9 domains. Undergoing a tribulation at this time would naturally attract the attention of countless people. How many bolts of tribulation lightning are there? How terrifying! Who's undergoing tribulation? In the northern region, countless Emperor Gu opened their eyes and looked in the direction of Hanueli. Not only the northern region, but the entire 9 domains were shaken. Countless streaks of light flew in the direction of the cold snow pavilion. Innate godly body. This is the mystic frost body. This woman must have had an even more amazing fortuitous encounter. Otherwise, She wouldn't be so powerful. Many Emperor Gu were hiding near the cold snow pavilion. Their eyes were quietly sizing up Hanuali. The mystic frost body was not considered an amazing fortuitous encounter among Emperor Gu's level. At the very least, most innate godly bodies might not have the ability to enter the realm of Emperor Gu. However, Hanuali's current strength was not only due to the mystic frost body, but also an even more amazing fortuitous encounter. The more amazing the strength Hanuali displayed, the more amazing the fortuitous encounter she had. Let's go. This is our chance. If we obtain this woman's fortuitous encounter, our strength will be able to improve further. The few Emperor Gu hiding around the cold snow pavilion suddenly made a decision. Rumble. In the sky. The space opposite Hanuali was suddenly torn apart. 4 figures walked out of the space. Among the 4 figures, there were both young and old. Every single one of them possessed astonishing power of the heavens and earth. All 4 of them were ancient emperors. The old man leading them was an 8 Calamity Emperor Gu. The 3 people behind him were 7 Calamity Emperor Gu. Such strength was enough to control a continent in the Daluo star field. What's going on? They're not friendly. Pavilion Master, be careful. Countless disciples of the cold snow pavilion were extremely nervous when they saw the arrival of the 4 people. The arrival of the 4 people was obviously not friendly. Honorable sir, we're here for no other reason than to make a deal with you. If you hand over the inheritance of your cultivation, the 4 of us are willing to help you pass through the heavenly tribulation. What do you think? The 8 Calamity Emperor Gu looked at Hanuali and went straight to the point. With his knowledge, he could naturally see that the most amazing thing about Hanuali was not the spiritual weapon, but the cultivation technique that Hanuali cultivated. It should be said that it was the inheritance of Hanuali. Because of this inheritance, Hanuali had the power to destroy the tribulation clouds. Therefore, the 4 of them had come for the inheritance of Hanuali. Hearing the old man's words, Hanuali's expression did not change. She did not speak. She did not even look at the 4 people. She did not even pay attention to the 4 people's words. Honorable sir, it's just handing over the inheritance. It's not a loss for you. You're going through the heavenly tribulation today, which is extremely dangerous. If we attack, you'll definitely die. At that time, we can still obtain your inheritance. Chapter 1482. These 4 weren't the only ancient emperors who were hostile to Hanuali and wanted to take advantage of her misfortune. There were 20 to 30 ancient emperors and a few true emperors hiding near freezing snow pavilion. These true emperors had great ambitions. Killing an Emperor Gu would be the equivalent of reaching the heavens in a single bound. For example, although Chu Fengmian had obtained countless fortuitous encounters, when he had first killed Old Man Sword Bone, it had also brought him great benefits. If this was true for Chu Fengmian, it would be even more true for others. As Emperor Gu, I'm willing to talk to you because you've had a hard time cultivating. Don't blame us for not giving you face if you insist on not handing them over. The old man's cold eyes stared at Hanuali. The threat in his words was self-evident. Murderous intent surged in his eyes. Kill! With a wave of his hand, the 3-7 Tribulation Emperor Gu behind him began to gather spirit energy, ready to attack. How dare a bunch of weaklings threaten my woman? At this moment, a figure silently appeared next to Hanuali. Even the old man didn't notice this person's arrival. It wasn't until he heard Chu Fengmian's voice that he noticed that there was an additional person next to Hanuali, a quasi-emperor. The old man sized up Chu Fengmian with a puzzled look. How could a quasi-emperor suddenly appear next to Hanuali without him noticing? Don't worry about your tribulation. Leave these weaklings to me. Chu Fengmian said casually. He didn't intend to help Hanuali, but he wouldn't allow anyone to disturb Hanuali either. All of you, scram. Get out of the 9 realms and I'll spare your lives. The old man was taken aback by Chu Fengmian's words. The 3-7 Tribulation Emperor Gu behind him were equally stunned. A puny quasi-emperor? You dare to pretend to be a hero and stick your neck out? 7 Calamity Emperor Gu, who was standing behind the old man, suddenly burst into laughter and said coldly to Chu Fengmian. Looks like you're a native of this tiny 9 regions. You're indeed arrogant and don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The 7 Tribulations Emperor Gu said with killing intent in his eyes. Let me teach you a lesson. A puny boundary emperor is nothing but an ant in the Daluo star field. The moment he spoke, the 7 Tribulations ancient emperor made his move. With a flip of his palm, a long saber condensed in his hand and slashed towards Chu Fengmian. The dazzling saber light was so fast that it approached Chu Fengmian's throat in an instant. Brat, remember to be wiser in your next life. The 7 Tribulations Emperor Gu laughed sinisterly. But before he could finish his smile, his voice suddenly stopped. Dragon scales began to form around Chu Fengmian's body. When the blade landed on the dragon scales, it was unable to move them at all. Then, the dragon scales gathered together and transformed into a dragon claw. It descended from the sky and slammed into the body of the 7 Tribulations ancient emperor. Bam! The dragon claw bombarded down, causing the world to tremble. The body of the 7 Tribulations Emperor Gu was immediately crushed and smashed to the ground, turning into a pool of blood. A 7 Tribulations Emperor Gu, who was so arrogant and tyrannical just a moment ago, was smashed to the ground and destroyed. This scene shocked countless people in the surroundings. The disciples of the Cold Snow Pavilion were fine, but Hanyu Ali's tribulation attracted a large number of experts from the 9 regions. This was especially true for the true emperors who wanted to take advantage of the situation. All of them widened their eyes in disbelief. This was an Emperor Gu, a 7 Tribulations Emperor Gu. Even the weakest among them was an Emperor Gu, countless times stronger than a true emperor. In any faction, the ancient emperor was a big shot. Even in a faction like the Holy Dragon Mystery Dimension, the ancient emperor was no exception. They hadn't even sensed Chu Fengmian's strength. However, Chu Fengmian could easily kill an ancient emperor. His strength went without saying. Your Excellency, hiding your head and showing your tail isn't the way of a gentleman. The old Emperor Gu glared at Chu Fengmian and coldly said. He didn't believe that Chu Fengmian was only a quasi-emperor. Killing Emperor Gu with one move wasn't something he could do with his strength. Even if Chu Fengmian wasn't a 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu, he was still a top figure among the 8 Tribulations Emperors. Such a character couldn't be a nobody. A group of villains who take advantage of a burning house dares to call themselves gentlemen? Chu Fengmian looked at the old man and said with disdain. Scram or you'll all end up like this person. Chu Fengmian said while looking at the Emperor Gu, who was turned into a bloody mist. He suddenly made a grabbing motion. This bloody mist flew towards Chu Fengmian's palm. At the same time, Chu Fengmian channeled his heaven-devouring secret art and turned it into a vortex in his palm. He wanted to completely devour and refine the blood mist. Ah! No! The 7 Tribulations Emperor Gu panicked. The Emperor Gu only lost a part of his strength after losing his physical body. He could reform his physical body again. However, once the blood essence was refined, he would die completely and there would be no possibility of resurrection. Chu Fengmian grabbed the blood essence tightly in his palm. He couldn't break free from Chu Fengmian's grasp even if he wanted to. Sir, please stop. We are all from the Qi Linshan. Please give us some face and let him go. The old Emperor Gu hurriedly revealed his identity when he saw Chu Fengmian's actions. The Qi Linshan? Most of the disciples of the Cold Snow Pavilion didn't know this name. However, the Sword Slayer Lord and the others were shocked when they heard it. They were also aware of the turmoil in the 9 domains. This was especially true for the 4 major forces of the Daluo Star domain. The 4 people before them were all Emperor Gu. They probably had an extremely high status in the Qi Linshan. Killing them was equivalent to making an enemy out of the Qi Linshan. Only Chu Fengmian's expression didn't change when he heard the old man's words. People from the Qi Linshan? I've already killed a few trash who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The few of you won't make a difference. Chu Fengmian smiled disdainfully. It's fine if you don't say it. Qi Linshan, you're all going to die today. Chu Fengmian still remembered that the people who wanted to propose marriage to Luo Shi were all from the Qi Linshan. Chu Fengmian didn't have a good impression of the people from the Qi Linshan. Chu Fengmian wasn't afraid of the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu. He even dared to destroy the law enforcement hall. Why would he be afraid of the people from the Qi Linshan? Die. Chapter 1483. He killed without any hesitation. So what if they were from Qilin Mountain? Only death awaited those who provoked Chu Fengmian. A 7 Tribulation ancient emperor was refined into a blood elixir in Chu Fengmian's hand. This blood elixir still contained a dazzling golden light. Chu Fengmian had not only condensed his essence blood, but also the laws of heaven and earth of the 7 Tribulation ancient emperor into this blood elixir. This blood pill was almost all of the power of the 7 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Luo He. Chu Fengmian glanced at the crowd and pointed his palm. The blood pill flew towards Luo He. Luo He was the strongest among the people in Hanshui Pavilion. In the current environment of the 9 territories, if a force did not have an emperor master, a few cultivators would be enough to wipe them out. Luo He's realm had reached the peak of the immoral realm. This blood pill was just right for her to help her step into the Emperor realm. Many thanks, young master. Luo He took the blood pill and was overjoyed. She swallowed it and sat down in Hanshui Pavilion to refine it. The faces of the several Emperor Gu from Qilin Mountain were extremely ugly, especially the old man from the 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. His eyes were fixed on Chu Fengmian. Your Excellency is quite capable. It seems that your Excellency does not put our Qilin Mountain in your eyes. The old man's face was extremely ugly. He had already announced his identity and said that he was Emperor Gu from Qilin Mountain. Not to mention in Daluo Star Field, even in the neighboring star fields, how many people did not know about Qilin Mountain? Not to mention in the small 9 territories that had already declined. However, after hearing his words, Chu Fengmian almost completely ignored him. He said he would kill, and he didn't care about his threats at all. This made the old man extremely angry. How dare a few insignificant natives of the 9 territories be so presumptuous? Very well, why don't you all join forces and kill this boy? Kill him and all his fortuitous encounters. We'll divide them equally. The old man suddenly shouted. He also knew that they were not the only ones who had come to take advantage of Hanueli. It was unknown how many experts were hiding in the vicinity of the Cold Snow Pavilion. This call spread around the Cold Snow Pavilion, and all the experts who were hiding in the void heard it. That's right. A few insignificant natives of the 9 regions are too arrogant. They don't put our Daluo Star Field in their eyes at all. They do need to be taught a lesson. Bang! Just as the old man finished speaking, the sky was suddenly torn apart, and a figure appeared. A surge of the power of heaven and earth poured down from the crack. Many disciples of the Cold Snow Pavilion could not bear this surge of power. The faces of the Sword Slayer monarch and the others turned ugly. Although they were not powerful and were unable to interfere in the battle, they were able to tell that the person who had arrived was most definitely incomparably frightening. He was not inferior to that old man. His spiritual energy was so strong that it was unimaginable. Another 8 Tribulations Emperor Gu had appeared. So it's Emperor Gu. The old man looked at the person who had arrived and laughed. Great Whale Emperor Gu, the overlord of the vast sea of the Daluo Star Field. Although Chu Fengmian had not seen this person before, he had heard of the name Great Whale Emperor Gu. He was the overlord of the vast sea. It was said that the vast sea was an extremely strange continent. Most of the regions in the vast sea were submerged by the sea, and it was a boundless sea. The Great Whale Emperor Gu was a dragon whale in the vast sea. He had an amazing encounter that allowed him to step into the 8 Tribulations Emperor Gu's level. The dragon whale's body was considered incomparably huge among the monster beast clan, and its spiritual energy was extremely strong. In terms of spiritual energy alone, 100 human martial artists might not be able to compete with the Great Whale Emperor Gu. the experts among the 8 tribulations Emperor Gu were not inferior to Great Elder He Chen and the others. However, Chu Fengmian was not afraid of people of this level. The only thing he was worried about now was the existence of the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. Today, whoever dares to take a step forward will die. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered as he waved his hand. Suddenly, a wave of spiritual energy surrounded the cold snow pavilion and turned into a circle. The Great Whale Emperor Gu and the 3 Emperor Gus of the Qilin Mountain were enveloped in it. What an arrogant kid. If I don't teach you a lesson today, you will think that there is no one in the Daluo star field? The Great Whale Emperor Gu could not help but show some anger when he saw Chu Fengmian's relaxed expression. This attitude showed that he was looking down on him, an 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. Is that so? A group of useless chickens and pottery dogs can't enter my eyes. It's useless no matter how many of them there are. Chu Fengmian said indifferently. Everyone, come at me together. There's no need to hide and waste time. When Chu Fengmian spoke, he looked at the surroundings of the cold snow pavilion. This sentence was obviously not said to the Great Whale Emperor Gu, but to the Emperor Gu hidden outside the cold snow pavilion. Is this kid crazy? Does he really think that he is invincible? Does he intend to become enemies with all of us? What an arrogant kid. He must be taught a lesson. Many of the Emperor Gu hidden in the shadows did not have the intention to attack, but now that they heard Chu Fengmian's words, they were furious. As Emperor Gu, there were no small figures. They were all important figures of the major forces. Chu Fengmian's words could be said to have provoked all of them. The gazes that were looking at Chu Fengmian became unfriendly as they glared at Chu Fengmian. Just the 3 Emperor Gu of the Qilin Mountain and the Great Whale Emperor Gu alone, there were very few 8 tribulations Emperor Gu in the Daluo star field who could contend with them. Under such circumstances, Chu Fengmian still dared to be arrogant. Kid, since you are courting death, don't blame us. Whoosh! Another 2 figures flew out from the sky. The 2 Emperor Gu, Jianwang and Jiangyun of the Avalon of 5 Elements. These 2 Emperor Gu are biological brothers. Although they are both 7 tribulations Emperor Gu, their minds are connected. When they join forces, their strength is stronger than many 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. Seeing these 2 figures, many people around the cold snow pavilion recognized them and cried out in surprise. There was a huge gap between the 7 tribulations Emperor Gu and the 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. Even 7 tribulations Emperor Gu would find it difficult to contend with an 8 tribulations Emperor Gu, let alone an 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. However, the 2 Emperor Gu, Jianyan and Jiangyun, were able to defeat an 8 tribulations Emperor Gu when they joined forces. This was enough to prove their strength. These 2 were also the famous twin Emperor Gu. Chapter 1484. Emperor Gu's older brother, Jianyan, glared at Chu Fengmian and shouted. Lad, your aptitude is rare even in the Avalon of 5 Elements. Your true cultivation level shouldn't be that of an ancient emperor, right? Not Emperor Gu? Then he is? A true emperor? He's a true emperor? The ancient emperors and true emperors around Cold Snow Pavilion were startled and began discussing in disbelief. They couldn't see through Chu Fengmian's cultivation. To be more exact, they only saw him as a quasi-emperor. However, judging from the strength that Chu Fengmian had just displayed, no one had ever treated Chu Fengmian as a quasi-emperor. After all, Chu Fengmian had killed a 7 tribulation ancient emperor as easily as crushing an ant. Such strength was definitely not something a quasi-emperor could achieve. That's why they assumed that Chu Fengmian cultivated a special merit law to hide his cultivation. Therefore, when he appeared, he was only at the quasi-emperor realm. But now, Jiangyan's words hit them in the head. Chu Fengmian was an Emperor Gu? Was he a true emperor? It was shocking enough for a 6 tribulation true emperor to kill a 7 tribulation ancient emperor so easily. Moreover, Chu Fengmian's cultivation? Chu Fengmian was only a quasi-emperor? At the thought of this, many of the ancient emperors, who had no intention of making a move, started to get restless. Geniuses who could fight across realms didn't only have heaven-defying talents, they also had heaven-defying fortunes. Killing Emperor Gu as a quasi-emperor? Just how heaven-defying must one's fortune be in order to accomplish this? Even I can't help but want to fight such a genius. A cloud of black fog suddenly flew out. When this cloud of black fog appeared, it covered the sky and covered the sun. Within this black fog, an old man slowly appeared. This old man was extremely skinny. In fact, he looked like a skeleton. He was all skin and bones. He looked extremely vicious. His voice was extremely hoarse, causing people to feel uncomfortable when they heard it. At the same time, Chu Fengmian could tell that this old man was an 8 tribulation ancient emperor. Old dried bone. That old guy can't wait anymore. We didn't hear about him coming to the 9 realms. This guy has always been ruthless. Looks like this brat didn't have a great fortune or he wouldn't have come out. The ancient emperors and true emperors around Cold Snow Pavilion were even more shocked than when they saw the twin emperors. Their voices became even louder. Old dried bone, you want to get involved too? The ancient whale emperor stared at Elder Dried Bone, his eyes flashing with wariness and hostility. Elder Withered Bone was indeed strange and difficult to deal with. Moreover, he was extremely ruthless. It was said that many 8 tribulation ancient emperors had died in his hands. No one wanted to be associated with him. I only want this person's fortune. Golden Bamboo, didn't you say that anyone can get a share? Old Dried Bone looked over at the old man from Firstwood Mountain. After all, they had all appeared under his command. Kill this brat and you'll get a share of his fortune. The old man named Golden Bamboo pondered for a moment before nodding. Including the twin Emperor Gu, they had 4 Emperor Gu on their side. Moreover, it wasn't just the twin Emperor Gu. Old Dried Bone, Giant Whale Emperor Gu, and more than a dozen 7 Emperor Gu also showed up. After hearing that Chu Fengmian was only a quasi-emperor, they couldn't wait any longer and came to get a share of the loot. Of course, they couldn't get the lion's share. However, after seeing Chu Fengmian's heaven-defying fortune, even a share of the loot would be a great fortune for them. More than a dozen Emperor Gu surrounded Chu Fengmian, each of them emitting an incomparably terrifying power and accumulating it. In the next moment, it seemed as if they were going to explode with power and completely kill Chu Fengmian here. Jianwang also sized up Chu Fengmian and said, "It's a pity that you don't know how to take a step back with such aptitude. If you had taken a step back today, you wouldn't have fallen to such a state. Your future is limitless, but it's a pity that you're going to die prematurely today." Jiang Yan and Jiang Yun made no attempt to conceal the killing intent in their words. Today, so many Emperor Gu had attacked together and had no intention of letting Chu Fengmian go. The only solution today was Chu Fengmian's death. "You're not qualified to make me take a step back," Chu Fengmian said coldly. "This is the freezing snow pavilion. Since you dared to come in today, none of you should plan to leave. I'll kill you today and let others see the consequences of making an enemy out of me." Chu Fengmian's gaze swept across the crowd. Arrogant and conceited. Jiang Yan snorted coldly. "Young man, such arrogance will only bring disaster to you. Admit defeat now and we'll let you die a quick death." Giant Whale Emperor Gu also said, "Keek keek, don't waste your breath on this brat. If you don't attack, this old man will." Elder Dried Bone stared at Chu Fengmian, the greed in his small eyes was undisguised. "Kill!" Golden Bamboo Emperor Gu of Qilin Mountain shouted angrily. In an instant, all Emperor Gu attacked. More than a dozen Emperor Gu present had accumulated enough power. At this moment, they attacked together and bombarded Chu Fengmian with killing moves. "Little bastard! How dare you kill my Qilin Mountain Emperor Gu? Today, I'll use your blood as a sacrifice to him." Golden Bamboo Emperor Gu roared wildly. With a roar, a golden bamboo appeared in his palm. This golden bamboo seemed to have the power to contain the world's power. The power of the other Emperor Gu present was integrated into this golden bamboo and condensed in an instant. Boom! The golden bamboo swept down. It was at least tens of thousands of feet long. Everything that came into contact with the ordinary-looking golden bamboo was annihilated by the power contained within. The combined power of more than a dozen Emperor Gu was enough to destroy everything. Heaven and earth trembled. The golden bamboo swept towards Chu Fengmian and ruthlessly slapped at him. Boom! In the air, Chu Fengmian's body collided with the golden bamboo. It seemed that the speed of the golden bamboo was too fast for Chu Fengmian to dodge. He collided with the golden bamboo with his body. Boom! Terrifying power poured out and shrouded Chu Fengmian's body. Heaven and earth collapsed, and Chu Fengmian was at the center of the collapse. Is this brat dead? He's dead for sure. How can he survive such power? Chapter 1485. Everyone gasped in shock as they watched the terrifying golden bamboo sweep everything in its path. The combined power of more than 10 Emperor Gu was extremely terrifying. As for Chu Fengmian, who was at the center of it all. Under such terrifying power, even the strongest Emperor Gu would die, let alone Chu Fengmian, who was only a quasi-emperor. Even though Chu Fengmian had a heaven-defying opportunity, the gap between their realms still existed. Finally, the spiritual energy gradually dissipated, and a figure suddenly walked out from the bombardment. What? He's not dead? Seeing the figure walking out, one of the ancient emperors widened his eyes in disbelief. Even 8 calamities Emperor Gu wouldn't be able to survive such a powerful bombardment, but Chu Fengmian was still alive. Furthermore, it was only after Chu Fengmian appeared that the crowd noticed that there was not the slightest injury on his body. He was completely unharmed. Emperor Gu of Golden Bamboo, Emperor Gu of Giant Whale, and the others looked at each other, unable to accept this result. If they hadn't seen Chu Fengmian walk out from the center of the spiritual energy with their own eyes, they would have thought that Chu Fengmian wasn't hit at all. Chu Fengmian's half-step immortal real body couldn't cause any injury to him unless it was a one-hit kill. Is this person's body still human? Even 9 calamities Emperor Gu might not be able to come out unscathed. Some Emperor Gu were dumbfounded. It wasn't possible to kill a 9 calamities Emperor Gu under such an attack, but it wasn't possible for a 9 calamities Emperor Gu to come out unscathed either. Chu Fengmian's body, from top to bottom, was completely unscathed. Even Chu Fengmian's spiritual energy had not changed at all. It was as if blocking this attack was an extremely easy thing to do. Too weak. Chu Fengmian's gaze swept across the crowd. This group of people was even weaker than the group of Emperor Gu who tried to kill Chu Fengmian at the 100 Halls conference. They couldn't cause any injury to Chu Fengmian even if they joined forces. You useless chickens and pottery dogs? How dare you come to the cold snow pavilion? Chu Fengmian glanced at the crowd with disdain in his eyes. Luo Shi, who was standing at the side, had no intention of making a move. Chu Fengmian alone was enough to deal with these people. Brat, don't be arrogant. The giant whale Emperor Gu was furious after hearing Chu Fengmian's words. As an Emperor Gu, he had never been so disdained. Rumble. Emperor Gu's body started to swell with this roar. The power in his body also started to rise as his body changed. Roar! A dragon's roar rang out. In the sky above, a gigantic dragon whale appeared. This was Emperor Gu's true form. The gigantic dragon whale appeared and crashed toward Chu Fengmian. There was no skill involved, it was just pure power. The most powerful thing about the dragon whale was its power. The power of a dragon whale was hundreds of times greater than that of a warrior of the same realm. When the huge dragon whale moved in the air, it shook the earth. Long Jing? Your bloodline is enough. Unfortunately, it's nothing in front of me. Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed. Suddenly, a dragon's roar rang out from his mouth. The primordial battle dragon essence blood in Chu Fengmian's body and the bloodline power of ancestor Jianwang were completely awakened. A dragon's might shrouded the area. Emperor Gu's body stiffened. His face was full of disbelief. He felt an incomparably noble power from Chu Fengmian's body. It was a power that made him submit. Kneel! Chu Fengmian's eyes swept across Emperor Gu. It was as if an incomparably ancient dragon emperor was staring at him. His bloodline was also the bloodline of the dragon clan. Moreover, it wasn't an ordinary dragon clan bloodline. It was enough to be on equal footing with the primordial battle dragon. However, Chu Fengmian's bloodline had the bloodline of the ancestor of all dragons, ancestor Jianwang. The moment Chu Fengmian's dragon's might shrouded him, Emperor Gu went crazy. He wanted to resist, but the power in his bloodline was suppressed. Boom! The incomparably huge primordial dragon whale suddenly fell to the ground. It was as if he was kneeling on the ground. He trembled and didn't dare to raise his head to look at Chu Fengmian. What happened? What's going on? At this moment, many of the ancient emperors were still in a daze. Emperor Gu was actually defeated without a fight and knelt on the ground. Only Emperor Gu knew that this was a kind of pressure that he couldn't resist. It was a kind of suppression from his bloodline. In the face of this dragon's might, he could only submit. With just a few words, he made an 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu kneel in front of him. Even 9 Tribulation Emperor Gu or a half-step Celestial Realm expert might not be able to do this. But now, Chu Fengmian did it. Others couldn't do it, but Chu Fengmian could. Countless eyes looked at Chu Fengmian in fear. This kind of means was inhuman. They had never heard of anyone who could subdue an 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu with just a few words. The power of this person's bloodline is strange. An innate divine beast. Only the bloodline of an innate divine beast can make the giant whale Emperor Gu so afraid. Elder Dried Bone was the most senior among all of them. He looked at Chu Fengmian and saw the mystery at a glance. Emperor Gu was completely suppressed by Chu Fengmian's bloodline power. Chu Fengmian most likely had the noble bloodline of the dragon clan in him to be able to do this. But although the bloodline power could suppress Emperor Gu, it couldn't suppress them. Don't be afraid. He's just a quasi-emperor. Just kill him. With that, Elder Dried Bone's figure turned into a cloud of black mist and rushed toward Chu Fengmian. The moment he got close to Chu Fengmian, bone-like palms suddenly grabbed at him from the black mist. Sword! Chu Fengmian's gaze swept over and glanced at them. Several black sword lights suddenly flew out from Chu Fengmian's side. These black sword lights immediately slashed towards Chu Fengmian. The skeleton-like palms were all shattered. At the same time, more black sword lights flew out from the freezing snow pavilion. Heaven-grade spiritual weapons. So many heaven-grade spiritual weapons? There were thousands of sword lights flying over. For experts of their level, a heaven-grade spiritual weapon was indeed not worth their attention. But these heaven-grade spiritual swords were something that even they couldn't ignore. In particular, these thousands of black spiritual swords flew out and formed a sword formation in the air. Chapter 1486. Black Mysterious Sword Formation. This was the first time Chu Fengmian activated the Black Mysterious Sword Formation. The mysterious black spiritual swords danced in the air, forming a deadly sword formation. Whoosh! Whoosh! The black mysterious spiritual swords gathered together and slashed at everyone in the formation. The power of each black mysterious spiritual sword was enough for Emperor Gu to deal with. However, if there were 5 or 10 of them, it would not be so easy to deal with them. However, there were more than 1,000 of them in the black mysterious sword formation. As the swords flashed, all Emperor Gu in the formation were attacked. Several 7 Calamity Emperor Gu could not withstand the sharp sword aura and died. All the 7 Calamity Emperor Gu whose bodies were destroyed did not have the chance to reform their bodies. Above the black mysterious sword formation, Chu Fengmian activated the sky-devouring secret technique. A huge vortex appeared and devoured all the blood mist. Once the body was destroyed by the sword aura, there was only one outcome. The tables had turned. Just a moment ago, Chu Fengmian was attacked by more than a dozen Emperor Gu. Everyone thought that he was doomed. However, the tables were turned when Chu Fengmian attacked. Chu Fengmian's strength was beyond everyone's imagination. Elder Dried Bone, Gemini Emperor Gu, and the others did not expect Chu Fengmian's strength. They were already thinking of retreating. Let's work together to break this sword formation and blast our way out. Golden Bamboo Emperor Gu did not hesitate. He shouted loudly and rushed up to the sky. In an instant, more than 10 black mysterious spiritual swords flew towards him. However, with a sweep of the Golden Bamboo Ancient Emperor's golden bamboo, the black mysterious spiritual swords were sent flying. Gemini Emperor Gu and Elder Dried Bones saw this and turned into a beam of light and flew towards Emperor Gu. This golden bamboo is a pretty good celestial wonder. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered and fell on the golden bamboo in Emperor Gu's hand. This golden bamboo was not a spiritual weapon, but it was much stronger than ordinary heaven-grade spiritual weapons. It was definitely a good treasure. Trying to escape? All of you will die here. Looking at Emperor Gu and the others, Chu Fengmian's voice was cold. His body moved and a dragon claw formed above Chu Fengmian's head. Primogenitor's first move. Boom! Chu Fengmian attacked. Chu Fengmian's terrifying spiritual energy gathered on the dragon claw. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At the same time, the obsidian sword formations also intertwined, forming a series of killing formations that slashed towards the ancient emperor. Another 7 Tribulation Ancient Emperor was killed by the black mysterious spiritual sword. His blood essence was devoured by the heaven-devouring secret technique. The 7 Tribulation Ancient Emperors could not even withstand the attack of the black dark sword formation, let alone Chu Fengmian himself. In an instant, the sky was filled with a bloody mist. None of the Emperor Gu dared to intervene. At this time, anyone who dared to intervene would die. If Chu Fengmian was alone, perhaps they would have the guts to deal with him. However, with the addition of the black profound sword formation, no matter how many people came, it would be of no use. Almost all of the 7 calamities Emperor Gu died in the black mysterious sword formation. Only Elder Dried Bone, Emperor Gu of Golden Bamboo, and Jianyan and Jianyun of the Gemini Emperor Gu were left. How is this possible? How can this brat be so powerful? Emperor Gu of Golden Bamboo and the others roared crazily. They could not believe that a quasi-emperor would be able to force them into such a corner even if they were in a hopeless situation. But Chu Fengmian's strength now far exceeded their combined strength. Moreover, the black mysterious sword formation was constantly attacking them. Every one of them was covered in wounds. Even with Emperor Gu's recovery ability, he could not heal them. All of you, die! Spiritual energy gathered on the dragon claw above Chu Fengmian's head again. The second move of the primogenitor. A force that was several times stronger than the first move immediately fell. No! The twin ancient emperors, Jianyan and Jianyun, could not withstand it any longer and were smashed to smithereens. The two of them were the 7 calamities Emperor Gu. They were known as the Gemini Emperor Gu because of their telepathy. They were able to contend against the 8 calamities Emperor Gu. But now that they had fallen into such a situation, they could not even protect themselves. How could they protect each other? The famous Gemini Emperor Gu died immediately. The next one was Elder Dried Bone. The black mist on Elder Dried Bone's body had completely disappeared. All that was left was a bone-like old man enduring the power of the second move of the primogenitor. But his body was constantly being crushed. In the next moment, he could no longer withstand the pressure and was crushed. His essence and blood were devoured by the sky-devouring secret technique. Elder Dried Bone died. Among the group, only the Golden Bamboo Emperor Gu was left holding on bitterly. The Golden Bamboo Emperor Gu's true strength was not as strong as Elder Dried Bone's, but he could still barely withstand the power of the second move of the primogenitor. Chu Fengmian observed that this was because of the Golden Bamboo's power. The Golden Bamboo neutralized at least 90% of the power, which allowed Emperor Gu to survive. But no matter how magical the Golden Bamboo was, it could not change the outcome of this battle. Give it to me. Chu Fengmian glanced at the Golden Bamboo and waved his hand. The Golden Bamboo flew out of Emperor Gu's hand and landed in Chu Fengmian's palm. The Golden Bamboo still wanted to resist when it landed in Chu Fengmian's hand, but Chu Fengmian did not give it any chance. Dragon Emperor Gu's dragon aura surged and struck the golden bamboo into the sky-devouring secret technique. The sky-devouring secret technique suppressed the golden bamboo Emperor Gu's mark. Bam! Without the golden bamboo ancient emperor had lost his last hope. His body was immediately shattered and a mist of blood was devoured. The last person, Emperor Gu of the golden bamboo, had fallen. The dozen or so Emperor Gu that came to besiege Hanyu Ali's tribulation had all fallen without exception. Absolute silence. None of the ancient emperors dared to make a sound. All of them sucked in a breath of cold air. Their eyes were filled with fear as they looked at Chu Fengmian. His attack was indeed too ruthless. These dozen or so Emperor Gu belonged to different forces. Lone wolves like Elder Dried Bone were a minority. Most Emperor Gu had powerful forces behind them. They might even be related to the four major forces of the Daluo star field. Few people dared to kill Emperor Gu of the four major forces. But Chu Fengmian did not care. He had no intention of letting the tiger return to the mountain. As for offending the forces behind them? Anyway, Chu Fengmian had offended many people. He did not care about these few. Chapter 1487. Rumble. At the same time, on the other side of the sky, dazzling sword lights soared into the sky and collided with the tribulation lightning. The tribulation lightning was destroyed by the sword lights. The sword lights headed straight for the tribulation clouds. They swept across the sky. The tribulation clouds were reduced to ashes. Emperor Gu finally realized that their goal was Hanyu Ali's tribulation. However, Chu Fengmian's battle had attracted everyone's attention. Now that the tribulation clouds were destroyed, they woke up from their dream. She destroyed the tribulation clouds. Hanyu Ali really did it. Without anyone's help, she did it alone. The aura of an eighth tribulation Emperor Gu spread out. Although he had just reached this level, he was much stronger than Elder Dried Bone and the others. Destroying the tribulation clouds was equivalent to reaching the peak of the eighth tribulation Emperor Gu. He was only one step away from the ninth tribulation Emperor Gu. How terrifying! Isn't Cold Snow Pavilion one of the Nine Realms factions? Why are there so many experts here? Emperor Gu stared at Hanyu Ali in astonishment. Chu Fengmian was already terrifying enough, but now there was another Hanyu Ali. There was also Luo Shi standing next to Chu Fengmian. Although she hadn't made a move yet, her power was unmistakable. Another eighth tribulation Emperor Gu. There were 3 eighth tribulation Emperor Gu in this tiny Cold Snow Pavilion. This was only a small faction in the Nine Realms. Almost no one could believe what they were seeing. However, everyone now had the same idea, that was, they would not provoke the Han Snow School unless they had no other choice. The fate of Elder Dried Bone and the others was the best example. Chu Fengmian was only Emperor Gu, but in the eyes of the crowd, he was even more terrifying than Hanyu Ali. Emperor Gu hurriedly dispersed. No one dared to watch for fear of being killed by Chu Fengmian. Congratulations. Chu Fengmian looked at Hanyu Ali and smiled. Fortunately, you came. Otherwise, I would have failed in my breakthrough, let alone the destructive tribulation lightning. I owe you yet another one. Hanyu Ali looked at Chu Fengmian and sighed. She was originally an ordinary disciple of the Cold Snow Pavilion, and her only destiny was to marry the Crown Prince of the Martial Victory Academy. But ever since she met Chu Fengmian, her fate had changed and she had become who she was now. There's no need for us to owe each other anything. Chu Fengmian said with a smile. That's true. A light smile appeared on Hanyu Ali's face. This isn't the place to talk. Let's go back to Cloud Feather Palace. Seeing that Hanyu Ali still wanted to say something, Chu Fengmian spoke first. His gaze fell on the Great Whale Ancient Emperor, who was still kneeling on the ground. He had originally wanted to kill the Great Whale Ancient Emperor directly. But now, Emperor Gu's eyes were filled with fear as he knelt on the ground, trembling. This changed Chu Fengmian's mind. Chu Fengmian looked at Emperor Gu and said, are you willing to submit? I'll give you a chance. Open your heart and submit. If you do, I can spare your life and even bestow upon you a great creation. I'm willing, I'm willing. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the ancient whale emperor's face lit up with joy. He was scared out of his wits and no longer had the arrogance of an 8 tribulation Emperor Gu. Seeing Chu Fengmian kill Elder Dried Bone, Emperor Gu, and the others as if they were ants, he was filled with regret and didn't dare to oppose Chu Fengmian again. He thought he was doomed today, but Chu Fengmian's words gave him a ray of hope. Without hesitation, he transformed into his human form and opened his heart. Heavenly Death Seal. Chu Fengmian condensed spiritual power in his palm and turned it into a black seal. He immediately injected it into Emperor Gu's body. Once the Heavenly Death Seal was injected, Emperor Gu would become Chu Fengmian's slave and work for him. However, Chu Fengmian had encountered an incident where the Heavenly Death Seal was dissolved by someone in the ancient monster continent. So this time, he left a backup plan. The moment the Heavenly Death Seal was injected into Emperor Gu's body, Chu Fengmian condensed a devouring power into a seed and injected it into Emperor Gu's body. As long as Chu Fengmian was willing, the devouring seed could activate the devouring secret technique and devour Emperor Gu alive. Great Whale Emperor Gu, guard the cold snow pavilion well. If you do well, you will be rewarded. Chu Fengmian looked at Emperor Gu and ordered. He suddenly changed his mind because he thought of the cold snow pavilion. The current cold snow pavilion was still too weak. If Chu Fengmian, Han Yueli, and Luo Shi were here, there was nothing to be afraid of. However, Chu Fengmian and the other two could not stay in the cold snow pavilion forever. This time, Chu Fengmian returned to the 9 territories to look for Han Yueli. Secondly, he wanted to find the treasures of the 9 territories and attempt to break through to the Emperor realm. Therefore, Chu Fengmian could not stay in the cold snow pavilion for long. The cold snow pavilion needed someone to guard it. Now, Emperor Gu was the best candidate. An 8 tribulation Emperor Gu was enough to barely ensure the safety of the cold snow pavilion. Moreover, there was the mountain defending array personally arranged by Chu Fengmian and the hidden black profound sword array. Unless the 9 tribulation Emperor Gu personally came, several 8 tribulation Emperor Gu would not be able to attack the cold snow pavilion in a short time. Yes. The giant whale Emperor Gu heard Chu Fengmian's order and replied respectfully. He had now been sealed by Chu Fengmian with the Heavenly Death Seal and had become a slave. He no longer had the capital to resist Chu Fengmian. However, it was not easy for him to survive. Those who could step into the realm of Emperor Gu had spent countless means and went through untold hardships. No one was willing to die in vain. The giant whale Emperor Gu was satisfied to be able to live. After doing all this, Chu Fengmian did not stay. His body flashed and flew into the cold snow pavilion. Countless disciples of the cold snow pavilion woke up from their daze. They had never thought that the cold snow pavilion would be so powerful one day. 8 tribulation Emperor Gu. More than a dozen Emperor Gu had fallen in the hands of Chu Fengmian. They all had firm beliefs in their hearts. Only by cultivating well could they become masters like Chu Fengmian in the future. In a few breaths, Chu Fengmian returned to Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. At the same time, Luo Shi and Han Yueli followed closely behind. Chapter 1488. Young Master, I didn't expect your strength to have reached such a level. The revival of Cloud Feather Palace is just around the corner. Elder Yun exclaimed as he looked at Chu Fengmian. When he first met Chu Fengmian was only a divine power realm saint. Even in the 9 regions, he wasn't considered an expert. He could only be considered a genius. In such a short time, Chu Fengmian had returned from the extraterritorial region. His strength had undergone earth-shattering changes. Chu Fengmian had killed the 8 tribulation Emperor Gu without hesitation. His strength was close to that of the 9 tribulation Emperor Gu. Elder Yun had chosen Chu Fengmian to be the master of Cloud Feather Palace because he hoped that Chu Fengmian could revive Cloud Feather Palace. Elder Yun already felt that this matter wasn't that far away. I also have this plan when I return to the 9 regions. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered when he heard Elder Yun's words. But this time, I want to establish a force called the Sword Dao Sect. I was born in the Sword Dao Sect, but I can open a hall in the Sword Dao Sect to pass on the cultivation techniques of Cloud Feather Palace. The Sword Dao Sect was the sect established by the former master of the Sword Dao. 10,000 years ago, although there were very few disciples in the Sword Dao Sect, every one of them was a figure who could hold their own. During the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, the news that Chu Fengmian was a disciple of the Sword Dao Sect had been exposed. Now that Chu Fengmian had enough strength, there was no need to hide anything. The Sword Dao Sect from 10,000 years ago? Luo Shi and Han Yueli were surprised when they heard Chu Fengmian's words. Even they didn't know that Chu Fengmian had such a past. Chu Fengmian could reveal that he was born in the Sword Dao Sect, but he didn't dare to reveal the secret of his second life. He could only say that he had inherited the legacy of the Sword Dao Sect. It doesn't matter if it becomes a hall. As long as the cultivation techniques of Cloud Feather Palace can be passed down, it will be enough. Elder Yun didn't object. Cloud Feather Palace was just a name. He wanted to pass down the cultivation techniques of Cloud Feather Palace. As long as the cultivation techniques of Cloud Feather Palace weren't lost, it didn't matter what the sect's name. At that time, the Cold Snow School can also be merged into the Sword Principal Sect. Chu Fengmian looked at Han Yueli and said. Chu Fengmian intended to establish the Sword Tao School and protect the Cold Snow School. If the Cold Snow School joined the Sword Tao School, it would also be protected by Chu Fengmian. Sure. Han Yueli nodded. The Cold Snow Pavilion is also willing to join the Sword Dao Sect and become a branch of the Sword Dao Sect. The current Cold Snow School could be said to have been built by Chu Fengmian. Without him, the Cold Snow School would have been destroyed many times. Now, she had no objection to Cold Snow School joining Chu Fengmian's Kendo sect. When will the Sword Dao Gate be established? Establishing a sect is something that has been passed down through the ages. Luo Shi also asked excitedly. There's no hurry. Before I establish the Sword Dao, I still have to make a trip to the Beimang Academy. Chu Fengmian said in a deep voice. The Beimang Academy is actually a disciple of the Sword Dao sect. It was founded by my eldest senior brother, Jianwang. I want to go to the Beimang Academy and take it back. When he returned to the 9 regions, he also planned to go to the Beimang Academy and truly control it. After all, it was a force founded by Chu Fengmian's eldest senior brother, Jianwang. It must not fall into the hands of outsiders. The Beimang Academy? It was founded by your senior brother? Han Yueli glanced at Chu Fengmian and was a little surprised. Suddenly, her eyes flashed with some clarity. No wonder you could obtain the inheritance of Sage Beimang. So it was because of this. Han Yueli suddenly recalled that Chu Fengmian had obtained the inheritance of the founder of the Beimang Academy, Sage Beimang, in the sacred hall of the Beimang Academy. Chu Fengmian was just an outsider to the Beimang Academy. Even the descendants of many ancient figures in the Beimang Academy had not obtained the inheritance of Sage Beimang. Chu Fengmian actually obtained it. At that time, Han Yueli felt a little strange, but she could only think of it as Chu Fengmian's opportunity. It turned out that Chu Fengmian had discovered her relationship with Sage Beimang at that time. But now, the Beimang Academy has been occupied by people from the Yan Luo Starfield. Luo, she said with a frown. The people from the Yan Luo Starfield are not easy to deal with. The experts from the Yan Luo Starfield are not inferior to those from the Daluo Starfield. It's fine. It's just the Chen family, not the entire Yan Luo Starfield. Moreover, with my current strength, even if I face the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu, I can retreat unscathed. Chu Fengmian said coldly. Moreover, I will never let the Beimang Academy fall into the hands of the people from the Yan Luo Starfield. Chu Fengmian said directly. The current situation in the 9 regions was not so chaotic because there were still many experts who had not come to the 9 regions. When there were more and more experts in the 9 regions, the 9 regions would become more chaotic. At that time, it would be more troublesome for Chu Fengmian to make a move. Making a move now was the best choice. Let's go to the Beimang Academy. Chu Fengmian leaped and circulated his spiritual power. He turned into a ray of light and flew out of the cold snow pavilion. The distance between the Beimang Academy and the cold snow pavilion was very far. It would take at least a few months to fly there. But now, the strength of Chu Fengmian and the others was enough to cross continents in the extraterritorial starfield. Moreover, in the 9 regions, his speed was fast. In a few breaths, Wu Xingwu was left behind. Next, they passed through one country after another. Now, almost the entire North region had fallen into the hands of the Beimang Academy. Originally, the Beimang Academy could not do this. But now that the Chen family had moved into the Beimang Academy, the strength of the Beimang Academy was many times stronger. The first thing they did was to conquer the entire North region. It was just that the few countries near the cold snow pavilion had been resisting and were unwilling to merge into the Beimang Academy. So, many people from the Beimang Academy came to find trouble. Above each and every one of the countries, huge arrays were set up. These arrays seemed to have been set up by experts. Once all of them were activated, they would turn into killing arrays. Warriors and demon gods who came close would be struck by lightning. It seemed that the people of the Beimang Academy were aware of the impending crisis of the 9 regions and had arranged everything. The 9 regions have changed greatly. Han Yueli said softly. The 9 regions used to be a small place. It was not quiet and peaceful, but it was leisurely. But now, the entire 9 regions seemed to have gone crazy. It was bustling with activity and fighting for treasures everywhere. No one knew how many forces of the 9 regions had been destroyed in this turmoil. The cold snow pavilion was protected by Han Yueli and the others, so it was not affected. Chapter 1489. Chu Fengmian's group of 3 was extremely fast as they shuttled through the void. In a few minutes, they arrived at Beimang City, the entrance to the Beimang Academy. The North Sea Academy was built in a separate space. Without the Ark of the Academy, no cultivator could enter, but for Chu Fengmian's group, tearing the space apart was a piece of cake. With a wave of his hand, Chu Fengmian tore open the space outside the Beimang City. As his spiritual energy gathered at a point, a spatial tunnel was formed. Then, the 3 stepped into the spatial tunnel and traveled through it. Soon, the Beimang Academy fell into Chu Fengmian's sight. What a powerful restriction formation. Chu Fengmian gave it a quick glance. The Beimang Academy had undergone a great change. The formation was completely new. Even a true emperor wouldn't dare to rashly break through it. However, Chu Fengmian was able to kill the 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu without hesitation. This formation was as fragile as a toy in his eyes. Let's go straight in. Chu Fengmian said while pointing his palm. A wave of spirit energy shot out and tore the formation apart, creating a passage. Chu Fengmian and the other 2 stepped inside and returned to the North Sea Academy. Chu Fengmian didn't hide his figure and went straight to the deepest part of the academy. The Beimang Palace in the deepest part of the academy was also the Sword King Palace. It had been taken away by Chu Fengmian earlier. Now, there was a new palace in the deepest part of the academy. Although its spirit energy wasn't as strong as the Sword King Palace, it was still a heaven-grade spirit treasure. There were countless powerful auras in the palace. Clearly, all the experts of the Beimang Academy were gathered here. Right now, in this palace, a group of people were sitting together. None of them looked good. The mysterious principal of the Beimang Academy was also among them. However, he could only sit to the side and didn't dare to sit on the main seat. Many ancestors and big shots of the academy could only sit to the side. For example, the Wind King, Night King, Yang King, and Martial King were the higher-ups of the academy. They didn't even have the right to sit. The one sitting on the main seat was an unfamiliar young man. He didn't look old, but his strength was extremely strong. There were a few elders sitting below him, and each of them was exuding a strong spiritual energy. It seems that this group of people is now the real master of the North Sea Academy. Right now, everyone's faces were filled with a sinister coldness. The people we sent to the freezing snow pavilion are all dead. What the hell is going on? The young man sitting on the main seat had an angry expression and coldly said. 5 Emperor Gu and more than a dozen true emperors. Archon didn't suffer such a loss. How can they die in a small place? At the snow pavilion? The young man looked at the dean of the North Sea Academy with an unfriendly look in his eyes. Didn't you say that there was only one ancient emperor in the freezing snow pavilion, and that he was injured? What's going on? Young Lord Chen, please calm down. There is indeed only one Emperor Gu, Hanueli, in the freezing snow pavilion. The dean of the Biming Academy hurriedly said. All along, even though the Chen clan had taken over the Northern Mang Academy, many things were planned by him. Now that the Chen clan had suffered such heavy losses, he wouldn't be able to bear the blame if young Lord Chen were to blame him. What? Do you think that the 5 Emperor Gu of our Chen clan can't even deal with an injured girl? An ancient emperor of the Chen clan harumphed coldly after hearing the explanation of the North Sea College's principal. Of course not. The experts of the Chen clan are all invincible characters. There must be something strange about this incident. An old man from the North Sea Academy said as he wiped his sweat. Principal, could it be that Chu Fengmian's doing? Suddenly, Yi Huang, who was standing at the side, spoke. Chu Fengmian? Who is Chu Fengmian? Young Lord Chen's eyes flashed when he heard the unfamiliar name. You dare to hide something from us? No, no, no. Young Lord Chen, please calm down. Chu Fengmian is actually Hanueli's Dao companion. The Night King said nervously. He has always been inseparable from Hanueli. This time, it's most likely that Chu Fengmian is also in the freezing snow pavilion. This person's aptitude is extremely high. If he obtains an opportunity, his strength will certainly skyrocket. Perhaps it's because of him that the experts of the Chen clan have fallen. Extremely high aptitude? He's just a native of the 9 regions. What is he? The 9 regions is a place full of treasures. It's indeed a waste for a bunch of natives to occupy it. An Emperor Gu of the Chen clan said disdainfully. In my opinion, young lord doesn't need to rope in any forces of the 9 regions. Once our army arrives, it won't be a problem to sweep the entire 9 regions. As for these natives of the 9 regions, they're only fit to be our slaves. Hearing this, the group of people from the Biming Academy revealed a hint of anger in their eyes. However, no one dared to refute. Now that the entire Biming Academy had fallen into the hands of the Chen clan, it wasn't easy for them to survive. Who would dare to resist? Whether it's Chu Fengmian's doing or not, we must avenge the Chen clan. Young Lord Chen snorted coldly and said. Let's go. I'll personally make a trip to the freezing snow pavilion. Everything will be clear once I flatten the freezing snow pavilion. Suddenly, at this moment, an icy cold voice resounded from the sky. Flatten the freezing snow pavilion? I think it's your Chen clan that's going to be flattened today. How dare someone from the Yama Star Field come to the 9 regions? Get out of here. Boom. Once that voice was heard, the expressions of everyone present changed. The people from the Biming Academy were extremely shocked. They couldn't be more familiar with this voice. It was definitely Chu Fengmian's voice. As for the group of people from the Chen family, the moment they heard this voice, the anger on their faces could no longer be contained. The entire palace was shaken. Who's that? Are you trying to act mysterious? Get out here. One of the ancient emperors from the Chen family snorted coldly. He gathered spiritual energy in his palm and sent a palm strike towards the ancient emperor. This palm swept across the entire palace. Every corner of the palace was swept away by his power. Die! Just as this palm was about to sweep across, a dragon claw suddenly descended from the sky and collided with the palm. All of a sudden, the ancient emperor of the Chen clan was shocked. Before he could retract his attack, his body exploded in the air. Fresh blood splattered everywhere. Chapter 1490. What? Everyone in the palace was stunned. Soon after, they sucked in a breath of cold air one after another. How is this possible? Qianbai's body was destroyed? He was killed in a single move? This is Emperor Gu, a 7 calamities Emperor Gu. How could he be killed in a single move? Whether it was the people of the Qin family or the higher-ups of the North Sea Academy, they were all stunned. This was a 7 calamities Emperor Gu. In the Yanluo starfield, the 7 calamities Emperor Gu was a big shot. He was also an elder of the Qin family. Needless to say, the 7 calamities Emperor Gu was an invincible figure in the 9 domains. Before the upheaval of the 9 domains, only some ancient forces had such an expert. Now, Chu Fengmian actually killed the Emperor Gu with a single move? After the dragon claw fell, 3 figures stepped into the palace. The palace was covered with countless restrictions and formations, but they were of no use to Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian. How can this person be so powerful? Qianbai, whose body was destroyed by the dragon claw, shouted in disbelief. He originally thought that Chu Fengmian was at most a native of the 9 domains. He didn't expect Chu Fengmian's strength to be so powerful. Facing Chu Fengmian's dragon claw, he couldn't resist at all. His body was shattered. In the blink of an eye, the palace was turned into a cloud of blood mist. Trash like an ant, how dare you attack? Chu Fengmian stared at Qianbai, who was turned into a cloud of blood mist. He snorted and waved his hand, collecting the cloud of blood mist into his palm. If Chu Fengmian wanted to, he could crush Qianbai to death. Junior, stop. Impudent. Let go of Qianbai. The few ancient emperors of the Qin clan finally reacted and shouted angrily. Chu Fengmian, what are you doing? These people of the Qin family are the distinguished guests of the North Sea Academy. The dean of the North Sea Academy suddenly stood out and questioned Chu Fengmian. Hurry up and release Elder Qianbai and apologize. Chu Fengmian, if you're still a disciple of the North Sea Academy, quickly release Elder Qianbai. The elder of the North Sea Academy said anxiously. Is that so? Distinguished guests? I don't think these people have good intentions. How dare they show off their strength in the North Sea Academy? Outsiders should have an outsider's attitude. The corners of Chu Fengmian's mouth curled into a cold smile. His gaze swept across the group from the Northern Sea Academy as he spoke in disdain. The Northern Mang Academy is so big, yet you're willing to give it up? A group of trash. Chu Fengmian, you are but a mere disciple. What right do you have to be so presumptuous here? Yi Huang, who was standing at the side, looked at the ancient emperors of the Qin family behind him. It was as though he had found a backer and had regained his confidence. He spoke to Chu Fengmian coldly. You. Hurry up and release Elder Qianbai. Kneel and apologize. Kneel and apologize? Become a sinner? Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with killing intent as he looked at the Yi Huang. I think you trash are the sinners of the North Sea Academy. I want to revive the academy. You're all black sheep. You'll only be a tumor if you're left alive. Today, I'll kill all of you. Die for me. In a flash, Chu Fengmian attacked with a dragon claw aimed at the Yi Huang. Chu Fengmian, you dare to attack here? The Yi Huang roared furiously. The moment he saw Chu Fengmian's attack, he also condensed his spirit energy to form a dark night around him. His figure merged with the darkness. Boundless dark night. Eternal night sky. The Yi Huang had also obtained a heaven-shaking fortuitous encounter in the 9 regions. He had stepped into the Emperor realm and became a 5 Tribulation True Emperor. A 5 Tribulation True Emperor might be a character in the 9 regions, but they were nothing in Chu Fengmian's eyes. They were no different from ants. Die! Chu Fengmian sneered. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk as the battle dragon claw descended, the darkness that the Night Emperor had turned into was torn apart. The darkness that filled the sky was torn apart by the claw. His body was also destroyed, completely annihilated. Not even a drop of blood essence was left behind. He died on the spot, his vitality severed, and there was no possibility of resurrection. You dare to kill the Yi Huang? Disgraceful! Disgraceful! An ancestor of the North Sea Academy shouted in disbelief after seeing the Yi Huang's death. He turned towards the Emperor Gu of the Chen clan and shouted, "Young Lord Chen, please make a move and subdue this kid. Calm down, my Northern Mang Academy. Young Lord Chen, please do it." Yang Huang, Feng Huang, and the others kneeled on the ground and shouted, "Little guy, you're Chufengmian. I didn't expect to see someone like you among the natives of the 9 regions. Not bad, to have such strength at the Quasi-Emperor realm. You're considered a genius even in our Yan Luo Star region." Young Lord Chen, who was sitting on the throne, suddenly moved. He looked at Chufengmian, raised his head and sneered. "However, such strength is not worth mentioning in front of our Chen clan. Brat, it seems like you're also from the North Sea Academy? Alright, I'll give you a chance. Kneel down and submit now and I'll let you be the Dean of the North Sea Academy and rule it." "What? Young Lord Chen, this..." The headmaster of the Beiming Institute and the other progenitors were startled by the words. They were about to say something. One of the Emperor Gu of the Chen clan suddenly snorted. "Shut up. You have no right to interrupt the young lord's matters." The Emperor Gu of the Chen clan turned his head and looked at Chufengmian. "Brat, the young lord is merciful and has given you great benefits. Why aren't you kneeling down? From now on, work for our Chen clan and you'll be rewarded. Know your place and kneel down, kowtow and admit your mistake. I can forgive you for your sins. Let Chen go first. Kneel down, kowtow and admit your mistake." Another Emperor Gu of the Chen clan said fiercely with a vicious expression. "Otherwise, how dare you go against the Chen clan with your puny strength? If my Chen clan makes a move, slaughtering your entire clan will be a piece of cake." "Ha ha ha, you want me to kneel down? Slaughter my entire clan? Do you think you clowns can do that? Chen clan? Yan Luo Star region? How dare you act so presumptuously in the 9 regions? Hand over your lives. None of these people will leave here alive today." Chufengmian suddenly burst into laughter. Amidst his laughter, Chufengmian suddenly attacked. Chapter 1491. Chufengmian activated all the battle dragon bloodline in his body, and a vigorous dragon might shrouded Chufengmian. The World Edge sword box appeared behind Chufengmian's back. Sword intent soared into the sky, and the 129,600 blood and flesh crystals on his body condensed tightly together. Chufengmian was still Chufengmian. His appearance hadn't changed, but his aura was completely different from before. This was Chufengmian's true strength. Battle Dragon bloodline? No, it also contains the bloodline of ancestor Jianwang. Do you have the bloodline of an innate divine beast? Young Lord Chen was stunned for a moment when he saw Chufengmian's aura. Then, he was overjoyed. Very good. I didn't expect someone in the 9 regions to have such a great opportunity. If I devour the bloodline of ancestor Jianwang, I can obtain 2 innate divine beast bloodlines. Let's kill this man together. At young Lord Chen's command, all the ancient emperors of the Chen family attacked at the same time. Violent spiritual energy burst forth as dozens of killer moves bombarded Chufengmian. Among the Emperor Gu of the Chen family, the 2 Emperor Gu of the 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu were the first to attack. They condensed a strong power of heaven and earth and turned it into 2 divine rays that shrouded the sky. Let's deal with them. Whoosh! Hanueli and Luo Shi, who were standing behind Chufengmian, suddenly stepped forward when the 2 Emperor Gu of the 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu attacked. At the same time, the power in their bodies was immediately activated, and a strong power of heaven and earth was emitted. 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. These 2 are also 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu? The faces of the Emperor Gu of the Chen family were a little gloomy. 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu wasn't a cabbage. The number of 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu of the Chen family could be counted with one hand. Chufengmian wasn't the only one with 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Hanueli and Luo Shi, who were following behind her, were also 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Hanueli, in particular, had fought with Hanueli and injured her. Young Lord Chen had even injected a devouring power of heaven into Hanueli's body. Hanueli's. According to their thoughts, even if Hanueli managed to neutralize the devouring power, she would have to waste a lot of experience. It would be good if her strength did not decrease. Emperor Gu's realm. 8 Emperor Gu of the 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Before the two of them could react, Hanueli took the initiative to attack. An icy blue long sword condensed in her hand. Sword light flashed and the sky was filled with sword shadows. The 2 8 Tribulation ancient emperors of the Chen family had no time to deal with Chu Fengmian. They immediately engaged in a battle with Hanueli and Luo Shi. You neutralized the devouring power? Young Lord Chen looked a little surprised and sized Chu Fengmian up. Oh? You have the heaven-devouring power as well? The devouring power belonged to the devouring beast. Even the power of other innate divine beasts couldn't neutralize the devouring power. The only thing capable of neutralizing the heaven-devouring power was the heaven-devouring power itself. Young Lord Chen glanced at Chu Fengmian and also noticed this. Heaven is helping me. I've been searching for the other inheritors in the Yen Luo starfield for 100 years. I didn't expect to meet one in the 9 domains. Young Lord Chen's eyes were burning with desire. He had also obtained the inheritance of the devouring beast, mastered the devouring secret technique, and possessed the bloodline of the devouring beast. If he killed Chu Fengmian and obtained the power of his bloodline, the bloodline of the devouring beast in his body would be upgraded. At that time, he would be able to obtain an even stronger devouring power. The devouring beast was an innate divine beast. The power that Chu Fengmian controlled was less than 1 millionth. Only by obtaining more bloodlines would he be able to control more power. Devouring secret technique. Devouring heaven and earth. In an instant, young Lord Chen also moved. His aura suddenly erupted, and the power of heaven and earth gushed out from his body. It turned into a huge vortex beside Chu Fengmian. The vortex was so deep that one couldn't see its end. A huge force pulled Chu Fengmian towards it. Peak 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Young Lord Chen looked very young, but his cultivation base had already reached the Peak 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu's. There were no less than 2,000 Tao laws of heaven and earth on his body. The number of Tao laws of heaven and earth on his body was more than twice that of Chu Fengmian. The moment young Lord Chen activated the devouring secret technique, the Tao laws of heaven and earth in his body were integrated into it. The vortex really had the power to devour heaven and earth. What a mysterious technique. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered when he saw young Lord Chen activate the devouring secret technique. Chu Fengmian could see that young Lord Chen's control of the devouring power was far superior to Chu Fengmian's. Chu Fengmian also had the devouring power and even obtained the heart of the devouring beast. However, this wasn't the root of his power. His strongest point was his sword technique. As for the devouring power, it was mostly used as an auxiliary technique. However, young Lord Chen had cultivated the devouring secret technique all his life. The technique he used was naturally more mysterious than Chu Fengmian's. Chu Fengmian didn't dare to take the devouring secret technique lightly. After all, it was the power of an innate divine beast. Given young Lord Chen's means, Chu Fengmian would have no chance of escaping once he was pulled into the devouring secret technique. Sword. Swoosh. The world-edge sword case behind Chu Fengmian immediately opened and 2 spiritual swords flew out. At the same time, several streams of sword chi also flew out. In the face of the devouring power of the devouring secret technique, several streams of sword chi immediately slashed towards it. Boom! Several streams of sword chi collided with the devouring secret technique, causing the entire vortex to tremble. However, these streams of sword chi only caused the vortex to tremble slightly. In the next moment, the power of these streams of sword chi was completely devoured by the devouring secret technique. You want to break my devouring secret technique with such a small trick? Young Lord Chen said disdainfully. You're also the inheritor of the devouring beast. I didn't expect you to be so stupid. The bloodline of the devouring beast has fallen into your hands. It's better to leave it to me. In the future, I will definitely become a great existence like the devouring beast and stand above the heavens. Devour. Young Lord Chen roared, and the power of 2,000 heavens and earth's laws merged into the devouring secret technique. Immediately, the devouring power of the devouring secret technique increased several times. A surge of heaven-devouring power was unleashed, which suddenly turned into chains within the palace. Every single one of these chains was formed from the power of the heaven-devouring. As they intertwined together, cracking sounds rang out as they turned into a massive ceiling formation that locked down the entire palace. Chapter 1492. In order to prevent Chu Fengmian from escaping, young Lord Chen was determined to kill him and had sealed the entire palace. Sealed the space? Do you think you can defeat me today? Chu Fengmian sneered. Young Lord Chen's sky-devouring secret technique was indeed mysterious, but Chu Fengmian had ways to deal with it. He had the bloodline of the sky-devouring beast, so he knew how to deal with the sky-devouring secret technique. That was to kill. Capture the leader first. The heaven-devouring secret skill required a great deal of energy to be activated all the time. Therefore, Chu Fengmian rarely activated the heaven-devouring secret skill when he was activating his sword skills. Chu Fengmian found it difficult to deal with the sky-devouring secret technique, but he had a better way, which was to kill young Lord Chen directly. Two dazzling sword lights condensed in Chu Fengmian's palms and soared into the sky. The sword light swept across the heavens and earth, ignoring the sky-devouring secret technique and going straight for young Lord Chen. Trying to kill me? Young Lord Chen sneered when he saw the sword light approaching him. Just as the sword light was about to reach him, young Lord Chen sneered. Several jade mirrors flew out from young Lord Chen's body. There were a total of 81 jade mirrors. Each of the jade mirrors was a heaven-grade spiritual artifact. A total of 81 heaven-grade spiritual artifacts flew out. Each of the 81 jade mirrors was like an array core that formed a defensive array around young Lord Chen. Using 81 heaven-grade spiritual artifacts to set up a defensive formation, it was much more powerful than the defensive formations of many sections. The sword light bombarded the array, but it was neutralized by the 81 jade mirrors. It only made young Lord Chen take a few steps back. Kid, this set of Jade Emperor mirrors is an invincible defense for those below the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu. Your strength is indeed heaven-defying, but you'll definitely be defeated today because I've already established an invincible position. Young Lord Chen looked at Chu Fengmian and laughed. It doesn't matter how many tricks you have today. You'll be devoured by the sky-devouring secret technique and become my strength. Boom! The whirlpool of the sky-devouring secret technique spun again. The terrifying power pulled Chu Fengmian, trying to devour him. Young Master is invincible. A large number of Chen family's disciples in the palace cheered loudly, causing young Lord Chen's face to reveal a complacent expression. He looked at Chu Fengmian with a playful look. Brat, there's no need to struggle. Today, you, before young Lord Chen could finish his words, his pupils suddenly dilated. All of a sudden, a beam of sword light descended from the sky. In this sword light, one could see the stars contained within it. The galaxy that filled the sky seemed to have merged into the sword. What do you mean by undefeated? There is no one in this world that I can't defeat. Chu Fengmian operated the 9 Profound Sword Art and displayed the newest move of the 9 Profound Sword Art, which was the 4th move, Heavenly Mystery. The last time Chu Fengmian used the 4th move, Heavenly Mystery, against Little Emperor Yi, was when he forced Little Emperor Yi to retreat. That was the first time Chu Fengmian used it, so he was very unfamiliar with it. After his battle with Little Emperor Yi, Chu Fengmian once again focused on comprehending the essence of the 9 Profound Sword Art. This sword strike was far more powerful than the one he'd used against Little Yi. The power of the galaxy condensed on the blade and slashed at young Lord Chen. On Chu Fengmian's body, the sword intent of the Sword God Realm was fully activated. The the streaks of sword intent were integrated into the sword edge, becoming one with the power of the sword edge in his hand. As the sword light swept across, the jade mirrors around young Lord Chen began to shatter one after another. Even the protective array formed by the 81 heaven-grade spiritual artifacts couldn't withstand this sword. The fourth move, Heavenly Mystery, was an absolute immortal technique, a true immortal technique. In front of an immortal technique, all means were vulnerable. What? What kind of power is this? This sword art. This isn't a sword art anymore. This is an immortal technique. How can a puny quasi-emperor master an immortal technique? Young Lord Chen shouted in disbelief when he saw Chu Fengmian's sword move. The Chen clan was one of the major clans in the Yanluo starfield. Of course, he knew about immortal techniques, but even Emperor Gu couldn't control them. Even many half-step celestial realm experts couldn't control the immortal technique because it was a power that truly belonged to immortals. It was completely different from sovereigns and humans. The fact that Chu Fengmian could use an immortal technique in the quasi-emperor realm was simply beyond his imagination. Jade Emperor, condense. Invincible true body. Young Master Chen also felt the threat of the sword light. He pushed his power to the extreme and gathered the broken jade mirrors on his body again. His physical body was gathered together by the jade mirrors, forming a perfect body. Weapon and flesh as one? This kind of method was nothing more than a side branch. You want to resist my sword art? Chu Fengmian suddenly roared. All of you, break for me. The moment he shouted the word break, the sword light once again bombarded young Lord Chen's body. The countless jade mirrors on the invincible true body that he had just condensed shattered under the power of the sword chi. The heaven-grade spiritual artifacts were smashed into powder one by one. Oh my God! Is he still a human? Even young Lord Chen isn't a match for him? Who exactly is he? The group of people from the Beimang Academy were stunned and their eyes were filled with fear. Young Lord Chen was an invincible existence in their hearts. He was at the peak of the 8 Calamities Emperor Gu and was only a step away from the legendary 9 Calamities Emperor Gu. In their eyes, he was already an invincible figure and no one could defeat him. But now, he was suppressed by Chu Fengmian and even his heaven-grade spiritual artifacts were destroyed by Chu Fengmian's sword. This scene caused them to be incomparably terrified. The group of disciples from the Chen clan were also stunned. Many of them fainted from fright. Bam! Young Lord Chen's body was smashed in front of everyone's incredulous eyes. What was left of him was a cloud of blood mist that fled out of the palace. He had an amazing fortuitous encounter and his future was immeasurable. He didn't want to die in the 9 domains. Damn it! Damn it! When I return to the Chen clan, I must bring people here to kill this man. This man is too terrifying. He's able to master immortal techniques at the quasi-emperor realm. He's no longer a human, he's a monster. Our Chen clan will soar to the sky after killing this man. Young Lord Chen thought frantically in his mind. He wanted to escape, but a ray of light was faster than him. Chu Fengmian's ray of light caught up with him in an instant. Chapter 1493. Since Chu Fengmian was going to start a massacre today, he certainly wouldn't let anyone go. Young Lord Chen had the bloodline of the heaven-devouring beast. Killing this person and devouring his bloodline would be of great benefit to Chu Fengmian. Not to mention, the force behind young Lord Chen was extremely amazing. The Chen family had more than a dozen Emperor Gu in the 9 regions and 3 8 Calamity Emperor Gu. Such a force was much stronger than many second-rate forces in the Daluo star field. If he let young Lord Chen go, it would be tantamount to letting a tiger return to the mountain. Today, the hatred between Chu Fengmian and the Chen family had reached a point where they wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. There was nothing for Chu Fengmian to worry about. Chu Fengmian's figure flashed and immediately chased after young Lord Chen. With a wave of his hand, the space in the entire palace was sealed by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian had the bloodline of the primogenitor Jianwang. In terms of sealing space, No one was more mysterious than Chu Fengmian. Once sealed, even if young Lord Chen went all out, it would be difficult for him to escape, not to mention that he had lost his physical body and had turned into a mass of blood essence. Suppress him. Chu Fengmian looked at young Lord Chen and didn't hesitate to circulate his spiritual force to suppress him. Young Lord Chen was now an arrow at the end of its flight. He had lost his physical body and was sealed by Tianlong's power, so he couldn't escape. But after all, young Lord Chen came from the Yanluo star field. Perhaps, he had some secret techniques that Chu Fengmian didn't know about. Thus, Chu Fengmian didn't dare to take him lightly. Bursts of spiritual force condensed into a 7-story pagoda in Chu Fengmian's palm. 9 ancient battle dragons were hovering above the pagoda. This was also a supreme sealing technique recorded in the 9 styles of the primogenitor. The 9 dragons seal the heavens. The 7-story pagoda condensed and fell from the sky, suppressing young Lord Chen's body. Young Lord Chen's blood essence was constantly being compressed and nibbled away bit by bit. No, I'm a peerless genius. I want to conquer the 9 regions. I want to become the lord of the sacred region. How can I be suppressed here? Young Lord Chen roared crazily, and there was a ferocious look in his eyes. Great Yama ritual. Young Lord Chen roared and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. The moment the blood essence was spat out, it suddenly condensed in the air. Blobs of essence blood condensed into ancient characters in the air. These characters were so ancient that not even Chu Fengmian had seen them before. However, it was emitting an incomparably sacred, ancient, and sacred power. Young Lord. No! The other Chen Emperor Gu's expression changed when they saw this. The 8th Tribulation Emperor Gu fighting Han Yueli and Luo Shi were even more shocked. He ignored the attacks of Han Yueli and Luo Shi and turned to run, wanting to escape from the palace. Sacrifice? Is this the Tao of sacrifice? It's a blood sacrifice. Chu Fengmian stared fixedly at young Lord Chen. He suddenly understood what young Lord Chen was doing. Sacrifice. This was one of the most ancient martial Taos, the Tao of sacrifice. One could sacrifice everything in the world to obtain power. Among the sacrifices, the most barbaric and also the most ancient was the blood sacrifice. It used living beings as sacrifices. In the barbaric era, many cultivators captured other cultivators and demon gods to perform blood sacrifices in order to obtain power. The Tao of blood sacrifice was so barbaric that it completely disappeared in the ancient era. Young Lord Chen actually knew the Tao of blood sacrifice? You don't have to run anymore. You've received the grace of the Chen family, so you're destined to have this day. Boy, your means are indeed good. You're able to force me to perform the Tao of blood sacrifice. But today, you're dead. I'll kill you at all costs. Only then can I make up for my loss. Young Lord Chen chuckled as he watched the fleeing ancient emperors of Chen clan. Blood sacrifice. As soon as the word blood sacrifice was uttered, the bodies of the Chen family's Emperor Gu froze in the air. In the next moment, they suddenly exploded. The blood mist that filled the sky flew towards the pile of ancient words in front of young Lord Chen and merged into a blood river. It turned into extremely pure spiritual energy and integrated into young Lord Chen's body. Young Lord Chen's body, which had been destroyed by Chu Fengmian, was reconstructed by this force. Even the aura on his body was much stronger than before. More than 10 Emperor Gu, including 2 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu, were sacrificed by young Lord Chen and turned into his power. Chu Fengmian could see that these Chen family's Emperor Gu's bodies should have been engraved with a brand in their bloodline. Therefore, young Lord Chen's activation was enough to sacrifice them. What a ruthless method. Chu Fengmian's eyes were incomparably cold. This move was obviously prepared. The brand might have been engraved in the bloodline of these Chen family's disciples when they were born. They were sacrificed for this moment. These people couldn't even be considered real members of the Chen family. They were just slaves sacrificed by young Lord Chen. Under the effect of the blood sacrifice, young Lord Chen's spiritual energy rose steadily. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at Chu Fengmian with murderous intent. Little bastard, how dare you force me to this step today? You're courting death. Young Lord Chen's heart ached. The execution of the blood sacrifice technique had killed more than a dozen ancient emperors of the Chen family. It should be known that more than half of the Emperor Gu of the Chen family had come this time. Today, except for him, the rest of the Emperor Gu had perished. This kind of loss would be difficult to recover even after thousands of years. However, he had no other choice under Chu Fengmian's coercion. Young Lord Chen looked at Chu Fengmian with a sinister expression. He only wanted to kill Chu Fengmian and obtain his fortuitous encounters and immoral techniques to make up for his losses. Heaven and earth quake. Boom! Young Lord Chen attacked and blasted a fist towards Chu Fengmian. After sacrificing more than 10 Emperor Gu of the Chen family, young Lord Chen's strength was several times more terrifying than before. One move was enough to shake the heavens and earth. This kind of strength was close to young Judi's level, perhaps even higher. Attack together! Chu Fengmian shouted. Han Yueli and Luo Shi didn't need Chu Fengmian's reminder. A ray of sword light and a wave of primordial chaos immediately bombarded young Lord Chen. Although the blood sacrifice technique was powerful, the death of 2 Emperor Gu of the Chen family allowed Han Yueli and Luo Shi to lend Chu Fengmian a hand. Chapter 1494. Han Yueli and Luo Shi were both 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Han Yueli had obtained great benefits from the destructive Tribulation Thunder and her strength had reached the peak of 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. She wasn't any weaker than young Lord Chen before the blood sacrifice. Under the joint attack of the two, young Lord Chen's power was suppressed by more than half. Chu Fengmian might have to use some means to deal with young Lord Chen alone, but with the help of Han Yueli and Luo Shi, killing young Lord Chen was a piece of cake for Chu Fengmian. Dual Swords. First form of the 9 Profound Sword Technique. Voracious Wolf. Second form. Giant Door. The power of the stars condensed on the blades of the 2 swords and bombarded young Lord Chen with a slash of Chu Fengmian's sword. The 2 swords condensed the power of the stars and turned into a river of stars the moment they were unleashed, striking young Lord Chen into the river of stars. With the power of the stars in the sky, they continuously bombarded him. The 9-story pagoda also fell and smashed on young Lord Chen's body. Waves of power suppressed young Lord Chen until he couldn't move. Bastard! Damn it! Young Lord Chen roared crazily. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't break free from the joint attack of Chu Fengmian and the other 2. At the same time, young Lord Chen's power was also falling. The power obtained from the blood sacrifice technique couldn't last long. Moreover, young Lord Chen was forced to use the blood sacrifice technique when the oil in his body was exhausted. He was fighting with his last breath. If young Lord Chen was the one attacking, he might be able to fight bravely, but now that he was suppressed, the power of the blood sacrifice technique couldn't last long. Stop struggling. Die. Chu Fengmian watched as young Lord Chen's power gradually declined. At this moment, a sword blade condensed and slashed out. It turned into a sword light that slashed on young Lord Chen's body. His body shattered once again and turned into a cloud of blood mist. Devour the heavens. This time, Chu Fengmian was well prepared. He unleashed the sky-devouring secret technique and swallowed all the essence blood into the sky-devouring secret technique. As Chu Fengmian operated the heaven-devouring beast's heart, the blood essence was completely refined. A huge figure suddenly appeared behind Chu Fengmian. The figure was so blurry that one couldn't see its face clearly. The only thing that could be seen was a figure in the middle of the starry sky, who opened his mouth and swallowed up countless planets and continents. This was the true devouring the power of the heavens. There was no need to guess. It was obvious that this figure was a heaven-devouring beast. The Lord devour the heavens. Devouring the heaven-devouring secret technique was devouring the heaven-devouring secret technique was devoured it devouring secret technique. It was immediately devoured by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian could sense that the heart of the heaven-devouring beast trembled when Chu Fengmian devoured young Lord Chen's essence blood. This gave Chu Fengmian a fright. Could it be that this heart could come back to life? The heaven-devouring beast's heart was a dead object. Rather than calling it a heart, it was more like a spiritual weapon. However, as Chu Fengmian devoured the blood essence, the changes stunned him. He observed carefully and discovered that the power of the heaven-devouring beast's heart seemed to have become stronger. As for the previous trembling, it had disappeared. It was still like an inanimate object. Chu Fengmian observed it a few more times. When he didn't discover any other abnormalities, he started to refine it again. Soon, young Lord Chen's blood essence was completely devoured by Chu Fengmian. Not only did young Lord Chen possess the heaven-devouring beast's blood essence, but he was also a peak 8th Tribulation Emperor Gu. The power contained in his blood essence was more than that of 3 to 5 ordinary 8th Tribulation Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian felt that his power had increased significantly after he devoured it. His current strength was infinitely close to that of a 9 Tribulation Emperor Gu. He wasn't as strong as a real 9 Tribulation Emperor Gu, but he was invincible among 8 Tribulation Emperor Gu. Below the 9 Tribulation Emperor Gu, only people like Little Emperor Yi and Little Ju Di who had received power inheritances could fight him. Chu Fengmian woke up and made a grabbing motion in the air. A dozen or so empty rings fell into his palm. These were the empty rings of the Chen family's Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian glanced at them and found that there were countless saint pills and heavenly treasures. Each and every one of them was extremely rich. There were even many ancient saint pills and ancient saint medicines that had disappeared from the world. Obviously, the Chen family's Emperor Gu had obtained great benefits from the 9 regions. Chu Fengmian took these things with a glance and put them away. Ordinary ancient saint pills and ancient saint medicines couldn't increase Chu Fengmian's strength by much now. Han Yueli and Luo Shi had just broken through and now was the time for them to consolidate their realm. They didn't need to increase their strength. What Chu Fengmian needed now was to make preparations to break through to the Emperor realm. Once he stepped into the Emperor realm, Chu Fengmian would truly soar to the sky. When he stepped into the Emperor realm, his strength would reach an incredible level. His accumulation could be said to be unparalleled in the world. In the entire history of the Daluo star field, there had never been a genius like Chu Fengmian. Once one stepped into the Emperor realm, they would truly be invincible and invincible. Originally, Chu Fengmian was still far from the Emperor realm, but after killing young Lord Chen and devouring his blood essence, Chu Fengmian's strength rose again. Now, he was only one step away from the Emperor realm. For Chu Fengmian, it was enough for him to find an opportunity to try to step into the Emperor realm. Chu Fengmian, thank you for eliminating the enemy for the Beimang Academy. We won't forget your contribution this time. From now on, you are the principal of the Beimang Academy. We are willing to respect you. Just as Chu Fengmian was checking his realm, the Dean of North Sea Academy suddenly walked out and said with a serious face. This time, North Sea Academy was invaded by foreign enemies. We have to thank you for saving the Academy. That's right. Those vile Chen family villains brought disaster to the Academy. They committed a heinous crime. We didn't have the ability to resist and could only pretend to be polite. Now that you have returned, North Sea Academy can be saved. Another old ancestor of North Sea Academy stepped forward and congratulated. The arrogant look from before was completely gone. Now, they were all fawning. Even Emperor Yang and the others, who had some grudges with Chu Fengmian, hurried over with respectful faces. Those villains from the Chen family aren't the only ones who brought disaster to the Academy. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered as he looked at the group of people from North Sea Academy. Being swept by Chu Fengmian's gaze, the group of people from North Sea Academy felt a bone-piercing chill. Their bodies couldn't help but tremble. Chapter 1495. Chu Fengmian's thunderous slaughter of the Chen family had planted fear in the hearts of the North Mang Academy's higher-ups. Now that they saw Chu Fengmian's cold eyes, they began to tremble. Chu Fengmian, you're also from the North Mang Academy. Today's matter was indeed forced and helpless. If you let us go, we're willing to recognize you as our master and help you take charge of the North Mang Academy. The dean of the North Mang Academy looked at Chu Fengmian and his expression suddenly changed. You're just a disciple of the North Mang Academy. It's not easy to take charge of the academy. We can help you to truly take charge of the academy. That's right. The forces of the various families in the North Mang Academy are intricate and complex. The dean's position isn't that easy. If you cooperate with us, you can take charge of the North Mang Academy. When an old ancestor of the North Mang Academy heard this, his eyes lit up as he spoke to Chu Fengmian. If you kill us today, you can only destroy the North Mang Academy. It's impossible for you to obtain it. Didn't you come back to the North Mang Academy to obtain it? If you cooperate with us, it'll be beneficial for everyone. The dean of the North Mang Academy sneered when he saw Chu Fengmian remain silent. Do you think you have the capital to cooperate with me? Chu Fengmian glanced at them and said coldly. Kneel down and open your Dao heart. I can spare your lives. You! Chu Fengmian, don't go too far. Do you really want to fight to the death today? Our North Mang Academy has a heritage of 10,000 years. What kind of storms have we not seen? I advise you to. Just as Emperor Yang was about to speak, his voice suddenly stopped. A dragon claw slammed down from the sky. Even Emperor Yang, who had already become a sovereign realm master, was blasted into smithereens by this claw. You still dare to threaten me? Chu Fengmian said coldly. He had no interest in keeping these people alive. They had already betrayed the North Mang Academy. Keeping them alive would only be a scourge. If they were obedient, Chu Fengmian could still spare their lives. After all, they were the higher-ups of the North Mang Academy and could be responsible for managing the academy. But if they didn't, then there was no need for them to exist. If you don't surrender, then die. Chu Fengmian swept a glance at him. Chu Fengmian, you're also a disciple of the North Mang Academy. Why do you have to make things so awkward? You letting us go is also forming good karma. You might not know, but our North Mang Academy has a big secret. If you dare to kill us, you will also die. The dean of the North Sea Academy stared at Chu Fengmian and suddenly made a decision. What big secret? Chu Fengmian looked over. This Beiming College principal kept silent. After a while, he finally spoke. Let us go first. Let us go and I'll tell you. Boom! Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold. Hearing this, he didn't hesitate at all. He immediately channeled his spirit force and grabbed the dean of the North Sea Academy. I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. Submit or die. Chu Fengmian stared at the dean of the North Sea Academy, his eyes revealing a bit of killing intent. If you kill me, you'll never get this secret. The dean of the North Sea Academy still felt lucky and would definitely discuss with him. However, as soon as his voice fell, the spirit force in Chu Fengmian's palms suddenly condensed and squeezed his body. Since you're not willing to say, then you can go to hell. Bang! As Chu Fengmian squeezed his palm, the dean of the North Sea Academy was immediately crushed and turned into a bloody mist. At the same time, Chu Fengmian channeled the sky-devouring secret technique and swallowed the essence blood. Ah! No, I'm Emperor Gu. How can I die? The dean of the North Sea Academy cried out miserably. He wanted to escape from Chu Fengmian's hands, but everything was useless. The essence blood was mercilessly swallowed by the sky-devouring secret technique. The dean of the North Sea Academy was mercilessly killed by Chu Fengmian. Since he didn't listen, there was no need for this person to exist. As for the so-called secret, this was the biggest secret of the North Sea Academy. Chu Fengmian knew about it. What else could Chu Fengmian not know? After Chu Fengmian took control of the North Sea Academy, everything could be investigated. Dean! Little bastard, you don't deserve to be a disciple of the North Sea Academy. We should have killed you back then. Scourge! You're the scourge. Seeing the death of the Dean of the North Sea Academy, Emperor Yang and the others shouted with grief and indignation. Many of them had followed the Dean since a long time ago. It seems that you don't intend to submit? Then you can all die. Chu Fengmian's face was incomparably cold. With a tap of his palm, the old ancestors of the North Sea Academy, Emperor Yang, Emperor Feng, and the others who had just shouted were all shattered. Their strength was at the Emperor realm. They were considered great figures in the 9 regions, but in Chu Fengmian's hands, they were not even ants. Just a look was enough to kill them all. Their bodies exploded in the air one after another. The whole palace was filled with the smell of blood. Chu Fengmian was merciless. Indeed, Chu Fengmian wanted to take control of the North Sea Academy, but it didn't mean that he would be threatened by the higher-ups of the North Sea Academy. To kill them, Chu Fengmian just had to use a little more means. But to leave them alive would be a scourge. Chu Fengmian couldn't allow such a scourge to exist in the future when he established the Sword Dao sect. Today was the day for a great purge. The whole palace was now silent. No one dared to speak. Most of the higher-ups of the North Sea Academy had fallen, their bodies and souls destroyed. On the ground, only 2 figures were left. They were kneeling on the ground, trembling. Are you willing to submit? Chu Fengmian's gaze swept across and fell on the 2 people. These 2 people were also the 2 old ancestors of the North Sea Academy. One of them was Emperor Wu, and the other was the Vice Dean of the North Sea Academy, Deng Ling. The 2 of them were now kneeling on the ground. They didn't speak just now. They had already chosen to submit. Yes, we're willing. From now on, we'll only listen to the master's orders. Emperor Wu and Deng Ling, who were kneeling on the ground, heard the words and shouted loudly. The 2 of them were scared half to death by Chu Fengmian's ruthless methods. Chu Fengmian was indeed too ruthless and unscrupulous. Originally, among the higher-ups of the North Sea Academy, there were many people who thought that they could cooperate with Chu Fengmian. After all, they were the higher-ups of the North Sea Academy. If they died, the North Sea Academy would be in chaos and not suitable for control. The people of the Chen family didn't kill them because of this. But now, Chu Fengmian's methods told them that in front of Chu Fengmian, they could only submit. Otherwise, the only path left was death. Chapter 1496. Such an iron-blooded method made Wu Huang and Deng Ling no longer dare to bargain with Chu Fengmian. They knelt respectfully on the ground and chose to submit. Very well, open your Dao heart. Chu Fengmian glanced at the 2 kneeling on the ground and said coldly. These words caused the martial emperor and Deng Ling's bodies to tremble. Once they opened their Dao heart and were branded, they would become slaves. At that time, they would have no power to resist in front of Chu Fengmian. But now, the 2 of them also knew that it was meaningless to resist Chu Fengmian. Only death awaited them. Wu Huang and Deng Ling looked at each other and opened their Dao hearts. Chu Fengmian's palm moved and a surge of spiritual power was released. It turned into a black brand and immediately entered the 2's Dao hearts. It was the same as when Chu Fengmian controlled the giant whale Emperor Gu. At the same time, Chu Fengmian also turned a surge of devouring force into a devouring seed and inserted it into the depths of Wu Huang and Deng Ling's Dao hearts. As long as Chu Fengmian's mind moved, it was enough to activate the devouring secret technique and suck the 2 of them dry. The devouring seed formed by the devouring force was more difficult to remove than the heavenly death seal. The heavenly death seal could be dissolved by a cultivator several levels higher than Chu Fengmian. But the devouring seed only had one nemesis. Unless it was the devouring force, it couldn't be refined at all. And Chu Fengmian was probably the only one in the entire Daluo star field who had obtained the bloodline of the devouring beast. Young Lord Chen was a genius from another star field, the Yanluo star field. With this double insurance, Chu Fengmian wasn't worried that Wu Huang and Deng Ling would betray him. The 2 of them were the upper echelons of the Beiming Academy. Their understanding of the academy far surpassed Chu Fengmian. If Chu Fengmian wanted to take control of the academy, it would be more convenient for the two of them to step in. Master, from now on, we will obey your orders and serve you. The two of them were branded and knew that they no longer had the capital to resist. They knelt in front of Chu Fengmian and said respectfully, "Very well." Chu Fengmian nodded. "Go back and take control of the entire Beimang Academy. I plan to change its name and establish the Sword Dao sect. From now on, the Beimang Academy will be a branch of the Sword Dao sect." "Master, this is..." When the martial monarch and Deng Ling heard Chu Fengmian's words, they were both startled and confused. The two of them didn't have any thoughts of rebelling against Chu Fengmian, but they were a bit puzzled as to why Beimang Academy had to change its name. The North Sea Academy could be considered a first-rate force in the 9 domains, only above the 7 major sects. Especially with the help of the Chen family, the North Sea Academy was about to occupy the entire North region. At that time, they would be on equal footing with the 7 great sections. The sudden change in name was indeed a little strange. "Actually, you guys don't have to worry. This Northern Mang Academy was originally created by my eldest senior brother Jianwang. In order to pass down the legacy of the Sword Dao sect, it has been renamed and rebuilt." Chu Fengmian said calmly. Since Chu Fengmian wanted to establish the Sword Dao school, he didn't care about this secret anymore. During the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, the secret that Chu Fengmian was from the Sword Dao school had been exposed. Now that Chu Fengmian was back, there was nothing to be afraid of. What? The North Sea Academy is actually inherited from the Sword Dao sect? Our ancestor, Sage Beimang, is Master's senior brother? Hearing this news, the martial monarch and Deng Ling were shocked and said in disbelief. The two of them were the higher-ups of the North Sea Academy and knew countless secrets of the North Sea Academy. However, they had never heard of this. At most, they only knew that the North Sea Academy was established by Sage Beimang. As for the origin of Sage Beimang, even they didn't know. What? With my identity, do I need to lie to you? Now that I've returned, I'll lead the North Sea Academy onto the path of true prosperity. Chu Fengmian snorted coldly. With his strength, it was easy for him to sweep through the entire North Sea Academy. How could he lie to them? If the North Sea Academy wasn't established by his eldest senior brother Jianwang, Chu Fengmian wouldn't even have the thought of letting the North Sea Academy join the Sword Dao sect. We don't dare to question it. Deng Ling and the martial monarch hurriedly knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. All right, I'll give you 1 day to settle the matters of the North Sea Academy. 1 day later, I'll establish the Sword Dao sect. Chu Fengmian said calmly. Also, in the future, the Cold Snow Pavilion will also be a part of the North Sea Academy. Set a rule, no one is allowed to find trouble with the Cold Snow Pavilion. With the rise of the Cold Snow Pavilion, the disciples of the North Sea Academy had already had many conflicts with the disciples of the Cold Snow Pavilion. A mountain can't have 2 tigers. The North region was originally in decline, and only the North Sea Academy was considered a force. The remaining Earth Demon sect was not considered a force in the North region at all. It was just a branch of the 9 Demon City. Therefore, the North Sea Academy had always been the dominant force. The rise of the Cold Snow Pavilion also made many disciples of the North Sea Academy dissatisfied, and the conflict between the two sides continued. Since Chu Fengmian wanted to establish the Sword Dao sect, he wouldn't allow internal fighting. Yes, we'll go past the order. Deng Ling and the martial monarch hurriedly said and wanted to get up and leave. Wait. Chu Fengmian suddenly thought of something and called out the two. Master, do you have any other orders? The two turned their heads and said respectfully. Do you know what the secret the dean wanted to tell you before? Suddenly, Chu Fengmian thought of what secret the dean used to threaten Chu Fengmian when Chu Fengmian killed him. With the identity of Deng Ling and the martial monarch, since it was a secret of the North Sea Academy, they should know a thing or two. Chu Fengmian didn't need to look for it himself. This? The martial monarch's face showed a bit of embarrassment. He didn't know the secret, But Deng Ling thought for a while and said with a bit of light in her eyes. This secret should be related to Sage Beimang. No, it should be related to Master's senior brother. Related to senior brother? Chu Fengmian's face changed. Speak. Yes, the dean once told me that there's a palace in the hidden place of the North Sea Academy. There's something left behind by Sage Beimang there. According to the ancient password, it can only be used at the most critical moment of the North Sea Academy. Deng Ling hurriedly said. Last time, the people of the Chen family came aggressively. We almost didn't have time to resist and were subdued by them. We didn't have the chance to use this secret. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.